of the war of the, and that began a 25-year expansion of the National Guard's purpose in the force structure plan of the United States. We are now, and we should be, a ready reserve combat component of the active duty military. Now, here's my personal belief. I'm not a strict anti-war in my philosophy. I believe that war is necessary from time to time. And when we go to war, it should be done with the authorization of the representatives of the people, demonstrating the informed consent of the citizenry. I think the National Guard should fight and win America's wars, because if you read the strict interpretation of the Constitution, if you read the Constitution just in its clear words, it says that the National Guard can be called into federal service to put down an insurrection, to repel an invasion, and to enforce the laws of the Union. Coincidentally enough, a declaration of war signed by Congress or passed by Congress, signed by the president, becomes the law of the Union. At that point, Title 10, Section 12301, subsection A, says that the National Guard can and should be called into federal service because there is that proper declaration of war. The National Guard should fight America's war. They are very well trained. They are prepared. They are equipped. Every time we put the uniform on in the National Guard, it's for one purpose: training for war. And so we should fight and win America's wars, but that also must come coupled with a policy that we're going to win. Men in suits are going to stay the hell out of the way, and we're going to fight, we're going to win, and we're going to come right back home. But we don't do that because the George Bushes, the Dick Cheneys, the Dom Rumsfelds, the Barack Obamas, the Joe Bidens, they're beholden to the military-industrial complex and their friends in the defense industry. And so we get on these endless undeclared wars. They just go on and on and on. Congress sits by and does nothing at all. 90% of every member of Congress that signed the authorization of use of military force, which is not a declaration of war, in 2001, they're gone. They've died, they've retired, they've been removed from office, or they've moved on. They're not in Congress. There is no sense of accountability whatsoever in Congress at all. And for anybody to say that there is a proper authorization for our military to be fighting in Syria today because of what happened in Iraq in 2002 is dishonest. And we have to call those people out every single time they tell that lie.
Isn't it, I've always wondered about this, because they have the war on terror, they have the war on this, the war on drugs, the war on poverty, the war on this. It's kind of masking that concept of an actual declared war and using it as a guise to do all of these military actions without having to actually have a congressional, declaration of war. And then they're using that guise, that cover, to send everybody out into these just wars of, just for the sake of whatever they're, whatever we want to conquer next. I just see that as kind of, how do you get all of the people to go along with this? Well, it's a declared war. And I was holding so steady on that signal as soon as I started to talk. Did we touch a chord over there?
No, I got most of it except for the last little bit.
All right. But you get my point, Dan. I'm trying to figure out this dynamic of how the public itself, I understand the suits, I understand Obama and Cheney and Bush and all those guys are just warmongers, but how are we fooling the public? And from my perspective, and I would throw it out to you, are you seeing that when you're talking to some people?
Absolutely. Ultimately, I blame us, the citizens of America, for allowing this to happen. Our authority, what we gave to Congress, cannot be delegated to anybody else. And the fact that we've allowed them to delegate that authority to make war to another individual or to a bureaucracy, to a Department of Defense, that's on us.
Yeah.
We should have yanked those people home. We should have recalled them and beat them in the next election for every one of them that did it. And to the point about the war on poverty, the war on drugs, the war on inflation, the war on the price of eggs, we use war because it leads in the news. It catches attention. It catches headlines.
Right.
Everybody loves to use that phrase, except for Congress. And what they do is they rather do an authorization of use of military force. It sounds soft and cuddly.
Yep.
But essentially what it does is it tells the president, you get to decide if we are going to go to war. We're giving you the authorization to do it. And if you decide to go somewhere for any length of time, for any amount of money, for any reason that you see fit, we'll write the checks. And that's the difference, is they won't even use the language in their own domain because they don't like it, because they have to go home and explain to mom and dad on Main Street why their sons and daughters are fighting in Djibouti, Africa, or Cameroon, or the Cocoa Rebellion in the Congo. And we got American soldiers actively engaged in combat.
Yeah.
That is being shot at and returning fire in 17 countries right now.
17.
Can you name them? I'll bet nobody on this. I'll bet together, if we put our heads together, we could not name all 17 of them. But we are fighting in the Cocoa Rebellion in the Congo right now.
Of course
We're fighting in the Sudan.
Yeah.
And we are in this leapfrog mentality. That's the actual strategy that the Department of Defense calls it, leapfrogging, where we establish maybe the largest military base in the world in Djibouti, Africa.
Okay.
And then we send small contingencies out 2 countries away, and they establish a small base, and then we leapfrog all of our assets there. But we're not really there. We're in Djibouti, right? And then once we get all of our assets there, we leapfrog out 2 more countries. And we've done all over the continent of Africa in the name of fighting in the global war on terror. We might as well just call it the global war on poverty and fight that at the same time.
Right.
Let's shoot some more people.
Is that in any way, I mean, we're way past declarations of war, but what is the president has 90 days?
Under the War Powers Act, yes. He has 60 days.
60 days. Really. So is there any dynamic of that where you're talking about this? I've never heard this phrase leapfrogging. I'm just wondering if that's part of it, where you can just keep moving from different conflicts and then leave some people behind because we got to clean up after it. But then you don't have to even bring it before Congress. Is there some of that dynamic there?
No, they're not even that bold.
They're not even playing with that
powers resolution. They're using the 2001 authorization of use of military force.
Yeah. Was that wrapped up in
they haven't even invoked the War Powers Clause yet.
Was that wrapped up in the Patriot Act?
No, the authorization of use of military force.
Yeah.
No, it was signed by Congress. Congress put it forward, and they voted on it. In fact, in 2002, when they were going to do the authorization of use of military force for Iraq, Congressman Ron Paul from Texas, the country dentist. Some people have heard of him. He decided, I'm going to do the right thing. If we're going to go to war in Iraq, I'm going to propose a declaration of war. I will be the sponsor of it, but I'll be the first person to vote against it. But by God, we're going to do it the right way. And they laughed him out of the chambers.
Of course.
So we're not even so bold as to use the laws. We have declaration of war. We have the War Powers Resolution. We have the ability to respond to immediate threats to the homeland or to American assets.
Right.
They don't use any of those things. They use this made-up authorization of use of military force.
Because it's easier than actually defending, we went through the whole Iraq, with the general, what's his name? Powell going into the UN and lying about weapons of mass destruction or whatever there was. And then you've got a few years later, Bush laughing about the fact that there was we couldn't find the weapons. Ha, 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 ha. They lied us into these wars, to salvage daddy's reputation from the first Gulf War. And then you just have this perpetual, because I just think about this whole dynamic. And I loved your speech when we were at the event. What was the name of that one? Was it a Lincoln Day? Or was it Washington?
10th Amendment Awards.
10th Amendment Awards. So many, yeah. Anyways, but I loved your speech there, Dan, that diving into it, because it's just another dynamic or another twist of how we can keep the military industrial complex going. And we don't care actually about the cannon fodder, the men that we send, into harm's way. We don't actually care. We just got to keep the machine moving. And if we can use this angle to do it, if we can use that angle to do it, if we can twist it around to here, and we can just convince people that, well, we got a lot of wars going on. We got the war on poverty going. We got the war on drugs. We got the war on whatever, and it just keeps that mentality rolling along to where people don't stop and think about what's actually happening in the world around us and how much destruction that we're causing. We're not what's the Navy commercial? Global force for peace, and it's a big
force for good.
And I'm like, really? Why don't you ask some of these countries where our servicemen are being deployed and they're stuck in a bad spot because they're signing up to be honorable, to go there and do a duty. They believe, they've sworn allegiance to the Constitution, no matter what the higher ups have done. And they're going there thinking that they're going to serve their country. And then they find themselves in these quagmires and these jokes of a war where we're fighting for what? Control of the oil reserves. We're fighting for, control of a strategic area that's got a certain mineral in it. And it just to me, it's so convoluted. Dan, give me your thoughts on just the military industrial complex angle on this idea of how twisted they have to keep making it to keep us at war constantly.
Sure. Yep. I don't know if you can see right here, but I'm gonna put my finger. That's that right there is 2-time Medal of Honor recipient Marine Corps General Smedley Butler.
Oh yeah.
And he wrote an incredible pamphlet in the early 1900s called "War is a Racket."
Yeah.
Right. It was followed up by General Dwight Eisenhower in his farewell address when he said, "Beware of the military-industrial complex." And what both of those ideas have in common is that there is an outside entity, outside of our government, outside of the authority of the people and our informed consent, that have their hands on the puppet strings and control our government, and it's the defense contractor. And if you go to DC, and I was just there, I just got back yesterday. If you're in DC, all of the buildings on K Street, every one of them is a defense contractor, and they can see the Capitol building, they can see the Senate office buildings, they can see the House office buildings, and they are in there all day, every day. They run our government, and they run it with such a heavy hand that almost everything we do is based on what their needs. And if you look what Congress has done, every single congressional district in America has some sort of industry that contributes to the defense of America. Every single congressional district. Right? That's not unintentional.
No.
That is so that every member of Congress is beholden to the military-industrial complex for jobs in their community, for economic development, stability, spreading the gunpowder and the wealth around the country. That was very intentional. That was done by very smart men that build bombs and bullets. And they just have an incredible control over our military. You look at what we've done in Ukraine. Not only did we start that war, we caused that war. I'm not going to fight about or talk about the merits of Russia invading or Ukraine defending, but we started that. We fomented that coup.
100%.
And
no disagreement here at the table.
$180 billion of military aid and weaponry. And we do it with the justification that this will spark jobs in America. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that death and destruction was a jobs program, nor should it ever be.
Exactly.
But we send them all of our leftover stuff so that we can build all new stuff, and it's considered strategic.
Yeah.
How about this? We need to build a new modern war system. Let's destroy what we had before. Let's get rid of it.
Right.
Let's rid the world of all these cluster bombs and these leaflet bombs and all the other things that are killing the children in these other countries, but we don't seem to care because they're not our kids. Imagine if any of those little leaflet bombs found their way to the neighborhoods of Omaha, Nebraska.
Exactly.
Tallahassee, Florida. We would lose our proverbial minds.
Exactly. And we were talking, Dennis and I were talking a little bit about that. And then I was talking with, I think it was Dean was sitting here. I don't know. Anyways, just the idea that we've got to go in there and destroy whole buildings and stuff like that in the Gaza Strip with one of the most sophisticated militaries that can go in and capture former Nazis, and you don't even know they're captured until they're sitting there in a cell being ready to be brought to trial. They did that all covertly, got them, brought them back. We're manhunting them, and this is 60s, 70s, even in the 80s. And yet we can't go in and take out some Hamas leaders with strategic things. We've got to just blow up entire streets and blow up entire buildings. Dennis, what do you got over there? Well,
there are many facets to this, but starting with the idea of manufactured consent that goes on, as Dan was pointing out, as we're mentioning here, and General Butler talked about this. It's a racket, and when he said racket, he then defined it something like a conspiracy. But there are a number of different entities or groups that get involved in this. So yes, it's the military contractors, foreign special interests. You got the media. There's a whole. I mean, even in the financial world, there may be some people say this is Julian Assange said the war is not meant to be won, but to be continuous, and it's a giant money laundering operation that's going on here.
Yeah,
blood money that's happening. And then you look at the thing about the Second Amendment that's fascinating when you study what the 10th Amendment Center provides in terms of resources on that.
Yeah.
And also, a lady named Suzanne Sherman has done this work on this, and I think also Dave Benner, Mike Meharry, and Michael Bolden. But the militia clause in the Second Amendment wasn't, as some opponents of freedom like to say, oh, you have to be in the militia in order to be armed. No, they wanted there to be a militia, each state to have a militia, so that there wouldn't have to be a standing army. They wanted to have a navy to guard the coast, but the concern was that you need to have a state militia, because militia will stay home and defend our homes and defend our freedom. But if you have standing army, it might be used to oppress the people, as had happened with the British Redcoats, or it might be used overseas for imperialistic adventures and that sort of thing.
Well, when you have a vested interest in your own country, in your own land, and your own neighbors,
you're going to fight to defend.
You're going to fight to defend.
Right. So that was the point of that. But as that's been changed, what we see now is all these overseas interventions, frequently with no discernible direct benefit for Americans,
right?
But a lot of harm being done to Americans and to people overseas, in just horrible ways. And the usurpation of power continued, and might be controversial to mention this, but I'm going to bring this up. What we just saw in Yemen, and the Yemen story is a fascinating but very sad one. And Ukraine, Dan mentioned that, and of course Scott Horton, his great book Provoked, which is the definitive study on how all this happened there. But in Yemen, you had the Houthis were fighting against Al Qaeda on the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP.
Yeah.
and the United States was helping them. There hadn't been a declaration of war, but well, they're fighting Al Qaeda. And then Obama in 2015 changes course, and he starts fighting against the Houthis on behalf of helping the Saudis do that, aiding and enabling the Saudis to do that.
Mhm.
He also killed an American with a drone, Anwar al-Awlaki, who I understand was apparently born in Detroit, but he was saying some things people didn't like, and I don't know, but there was no trial, there was nothing. Just this guy was just murdered by a drone by Obama. Later, Obama had a second drone strike that murdered this guy's son when they were out there.
Didn't Obama say predator drones?
Well, yeah, they're doing that, but you're right. But they were also helping the Saudis as the Saudis invaded Yemen,
Mhm.
and the Saudis are big backers of Al Qaeda. So he said, well, why were we doing this? But with the Trump administration, that policy continued, and then Trump had a raid. I think the SEALs went and attacked somewhere. Then they killed al-Awlaki's daughter. There were these pictures, this cute little 8-year-old girl. Like, well, what's going on here?
Mhm.
And eventually, and the Saudis, of course, they're very wealthy. People wondered, what's this relationship? Why is this going on like this? And eventually, in the Congress, you had Republicans and Democrats joining together. I think it was called the Stop Arming Terrorists Act. And Senator Rand Paul and Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard and others, Republicans came together and they said, okay, no more. So it was a negative declaration of war. No more acts of war on behalf of Saudi Arabia by helping them do what they're doing to the Yemenis.
Mhm.
President Trump vetoed that and continued the policy. And just the other day, we saw that there was, because he's put out these tweets. Well, here are these guys planning a terrorist act. Well, how would anybody know? Apparently, it was a village meeting and a council meeting, and it had some religious deal.
Okay.
But I mean, we just murdered all these people.
Mhm.
And he said they will no longer sink. They're going to stop sinking our ships. Well, wait a minute, what ships? They sank some of our ships.
Yeah.
So, but there's been so that everybody's wondering what the heck's going on here. This is clearly wrong. But also, again, we have these acts of war going on without a declaration.
Yeah.
And under Vattel's Law of Nations, you can't. You're not supposed to be doing that. And under our Constitution, you're not supposed to be doing that. And this is a problem that seems to never end and just keeps getting worse. And now we're at a point where, whether it's Yemen or at Palestine and at Israel, or with the Ukraine and Russia, hopefully that's tampering down a little bit, but sometimes it's not clear because we get contradictory statements. And then this deal with Iran,
Mhm.
who many people say, well, the Iranians should get a nuclear weapon. I mean, like Martin Van Creeveld, the Israeli strategist, just as a deterrent, leave us alone, right? They would use it for that. But where are we going to bomb Iran? There was a nuclear agreement. He tore it. President Trump tore it up. So the Iranians are probably saying, well, why would we make an agreement with you? We can't trust you on that because But we have all these things going on, and of course, Biden was horrible in this. I mean, all these, and the whole Ukraine-Russia thing and the Russiagate was a scam and a scandal right from the start.
Yeah,
and we're very close to having a nuclear war potentially.
Right.
And something's got to be done. And I know I went through a lot of, but there's so much about this. It boggles the mind, and we're in a horrible situation here. But thank God for brave men like Dan McKnight and his colleagues that are fighting for Defend the Guard and for the people, the local folks. And he'll probably tell us about this. Diego Rivera, a great organizer, and they've got the group that does the phone banking in all the different states, fighting to make a positive change for peace and for freedom and for liberty. As we've heard from Dr. Ron Paul and others, and the late and extremely great Walter Jones, the congressman from North Carolina, would be another one that stood up for these things. But thank God for what Dan and his friends are doing, and it's an honor to be able to work with them in this cause.
And also, it's props to the Mises Caucus of the Libertarian Party. They've been organizing regular phone banks to lawmakers about the Defend the Guard Act here in Michigan. Dan, I wanted your thoughts. We talked a little bit about standing armies earlier, and how when the government has this large force of people that are just sitting idly by, they're more apt to be willing to use them. So I know you said that the Guard stands ready to go to war and that's their purpose. Do you think that should be scaled back? Do you think it's a problem having that force always there, potentially at the government's disposal? Do you think that there should be any reform of that in general? What are your thoughts, Dan?
Oh, great question. I think in Dan McKnight's perfect world, there wouldn't be a standing army. It would be a robust National Guard that trains hard, that's equipped well, that has strong leaders, not these yes men generals that they clone themselves and pull themselves through the ranks. I mean, real, true leaders. That would be my perfect world. And I don't know that we'll ever get to that place. The standing army has become such an institutionalized part of America. We celebrate them at halftimes of football games. We tie ribbons around the trees, and we give them discount fajitas on Veterans Day. It's such an institutional part of America that it is Americana. I don't know that we could ever get rid of it, but some good reform is definitely in order. And when I've met with Pete Hegseth twice before he was confirmed, both times he demonstrated to us through his words, through his books that he's written, through comments, that he is a believer in the constitutional process of going to war. Although we're not seeing much of that right now. But he is not the commander in chief. He's the Secretary of Defense.
Right.
This whole Yemen thing right now has got me incredibly discouraged. But I'll save those comments for maybe something where it's more topical. But as far as reform in the Department of Defense, absolutely. And we've seen some really, really good people get put into positions in the Department of Defense in this new administration that are focused on a couple of things. Obviously, the efficiency of the Department of Defense, passing an audit at the Department of Defense. The only department or the only sub-department in the Department of Defense that's passed an audit recently is the Marine Corps, and they've done it twice, I think, in 2 years in a row. But there does need to be some reform and some restructuring. We don't need the 900 military bases we have around the world. 900. I don't know if you guys have seen that interactive map that shows all the military bases of America all over the world, and then you can click a button and take all of them off and show every other country's bases outside of their home country. And it's few and far between. Like, I think China has 1 base outside of their country. I think Russia has 3.
Right.
And we have 900.
Yeah,
900 bases.
Yeah, why do
America.
It's ridiculous. Why do we have that? Why do we have that deployment? If we need to, it comes back to the constitutionality of it, of looking at not quite straight up isolationist, but being, our military is supposed to be there to defend just our borders, not to be a global force for good out there.
That's right. We are in the declining stages of an empire. This is what empires do.
Mm-hmm.
They stretch beyond their capability to maintain, and they push and push and push through a military adventurism. We saw it with the fall of Rome, and we're in that stage right now, unless we do something to grasp to pull it back under control. And 900 is not an exaggeration. That is actually I believe that's the hard number. And we do it because of that eye on expansionism, spreading America, democracy, freedom, liberty, and apple pie to everybody in the world, and forcing our form of government and self-governance on the world. Well, we tried that in Afghanistan. They didn't want it.
Yep.
We tried it in Iraq. They didn't want it.
Right.
We've tried it in Korea. They didn't want it. We've tried it everywhere. And it, just to show you just kind of how out of whack this is, 2 years ago, we passed Defend the Guard in the Arizona Senate, and it was on its way to the House. And at the same time this was happening, the governor of Arizona, Katie Hobbs, flew to Oman. And we all know where Oman's at on the map. Some people listening may not know, but it's a border state with Yemen.
Okay.
They share a border with Yemen.
Okay.
And she signed a de facto treaty with the Sultan of Oman, committing the Arizona National Guard to the common defense training and military support of Oman. While we were trying to pass Defend the Guard in her own state, while she was refusing to send the National Guard with gun barrels pointed south to the southern border to defend our own border, she was committing the Arizona National Guard to defend Oman. And that's just how out of whack we are. One, I didn't know a governor could sign a treaty with a foreign nation. And two, when was the militia ever meant to go to the Middle East and defend somebody else's border but ignore our own? We are it's just accepted.
It is. It is accepted. What is the approximate percentage, Dan, if you know off the top of your head, of National Guard versus regular military that are in those 900 plus bases? Do you have an idea of roughly the staffing or the how much?
I get the question, and we would know, but in 2017, under a direction from President Trump and his administration, the Department of Defense stopped reporting the number of National Guard troops that were on Title 10 active orders overseas.
Okay.
So we don't know, but we do know this.
Yeah.
45% of the total force structure of the entire military is National Guard or Air National. 45%. So nearly one out of every two.
See,
and we do know this, that the National Guard is on a permanent 1 every 3 year active duty rotation.
Okay.
You're in the Guard. They tell you to anticipate being activated 1 year out of every 3. So if you sign up for a 6-year hitch, you're going twice.
Okay.
And that's just the standard. That's the pace of the mission now for the National Guard.
And I thought, it's my understanding, and this is media and me not doing more investigation, but I thought until I saw your speech at the 10th Amendment Awards there, that the National Guard was really not an active force, even though, we just recently rewatched Three Kings about, Iraq and getting the gold there. And it says right on there, the main character, Mark Wahlberg's playing Troy Barlow, is National Guard, and I was like, man, now it makes me think that here's a National Guardsman that's deployed over there. And I'm thinking about that dynamic, and I'm looking at it. And so it it makes you think more and more about the amount of people, because part of it goes back to Bush Jr., that he was Air National Guard and didn't actually do any service and didn't do anything. So you think when you're in the Guard, well, you're there if we ever get attacked in the homeland, and you're just there to kind of be, which leads me to my next question. And you can jump on any that you want, but explain to the audience out there what really the difference is between what Dennis mentioned, the Second Amendment militia, a true organized state militia, versus the National Guard provision. What is the real difference between those two dynamics as you see it? And then that kind of goes back to what I was saying initially, that idea of I thought they were just, you trained and then you were on reserve, quite literally, waiting for something to happen, and you see, some university has a riot and the National Guard's deployed, and you think, okay, that's what they're doing. And then you find out that I think you just said 45% of them are being, roughly, we can guess, are being deployed all over the world. So respond to a few of those points there, Dan.
The sea bridge that we use, the air bridge over the Atlantic Ocean, with the KC-135 refuelers, is all Air National Guard. So all the military transports flying from North America over to the Middle East, all of them are refueled over the ocean by Air National Guardsmen. It's a permanent mission of the Air National Guard.
Okay.
And so the National Guard is, they do a lot more than what people think. We have all seen the TV commercials, right? 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks in the year, serve your community, serve your state, get some money for college.
That's what we're told.
That's what we're told.
Yeah.
And that is just not true. You are required to drill 1 weekend a month. You are required to train for 2 weeks in the summer at your annual training. You are required to defend your state, and the governor is your commander in chief. These are requirements of the National Guard. The things that are not talked about are the other side of that coin. You also have this federal role. And you can be called for, like I said, for any of those 5 purposes found in Title 10 or any of the 3 purposes found in the Constitution. And it's those 8 combined purposes that the federal government has run away with this incredibly large amount of bodies that they have at their disposal. And so when we see the National Guard from Louisiana in 2005, they were in Iraq building roads and levees and bridges and dams when Hurricane Katrina hit land, and they needed them there in their state to build, roads and levees and bridges and dams.
Yeah, exactly.
They just weren't there, right? Or when the California wildfires from a few years ago happened, and they spread all the way up into Oregon, and there were 2 heavy lift helicopter units that were fighting the fires. They grounded them in the middle of the fires. They loaded their helicopters onto the railhead, and they shipped them across the country, where they put them on a transport. They flew them to Afghanistan, and they grounded them in Afghanistan while their troops, their crews, were in quarantine in a tent in Afghanistan because of COVID. So They took them off of doing actual missions in their state and sent them over to do something that we really have no business doing. And so I would love to see a restructuring of that. The National Guard, I think, should be more robust. We should have more assets, more money taken from the active duty military and put into the National Guard. And I think that would help eliminate a lot of this adventurism that we see of taking the military and going to Angola for some reason. So I hope that touched on your question.
That did quite a bit. And just to get our heads around it, because as soon as I heard you speak about this, I thought, I'm in, I'm 100% in. But then I want more of these details to help me, because then I'm going to tell people, I think we came on the very next show. And I think I brought it up. I think I had your pamphlets and stuff like that, and talked about the 10th Amendment awards and stuff like that. I don't think you were right away on the show, but I want to have that information so that when somebody asks me, I can go, well, no, I used to, and again, some of the disclaimers I've already said. I thought that, this was that you were just at home waiting for a natural disaster, waiting for this. And then you find out that they're just deployed everywhere, and they're just being used, again, as cannon fodder. They're not being used to win these wars. I think of, the little known, a lot of these details that we don't know, that all of the surplus, unlike Biden's horrible Afghanistan withdrawal, World War II, all of the surplus military equipment was sent to Korea and Vietnam in anticipation of those 2 wars. And most people don't know that, but that's where half the equipment was sent to Korea and half the equipment was sent to Indochina, ready for that next conflict. And they made a decision at that wasn't Chiang Kai-shek at that, or it was Chiang Kai, but they had the what's it called, the meeting with Roosevelt and
Yalta.
Oh,
whatever one of the last meetings of World War II was. They made a
Parsons
decision at
Wall.
that meeting. We can no longer have these huge protracted wars. We have to have these small regional conflicts, and we can perpetuate them, and we can do this. And that's why they sent that material. And I look at what you're trying to do, and you're making huge inroads, Dan. And I look at that and I go, this is what we're up against. We're up against a huge military industrial complex that feeds off of this and has had a strategy since before really the end of World War II. And maybe it was even in their minds before that they're trying to perpetuate war, and they're trying to figure out the best strategy to keep that money machine pumping out dollars to destroy lives and kill them. You know, it's Madeleine Albright and being asked, is it worth a million people and 500,000 children being killed in Iraq to liberate the country? Oh, I think ultimately it was a good thing. Really?
without hesitation.
Without
Yeah.
hesitation. Go ahead, Dennis. What do you got?
Yeah, and this is really a striking thing, as people pointed out. So she said, well, it was a hard choice, or
It was a difficult choice.
but
Yes.
and it was a hard. Well, not for her.
No.
She bore no accountability. No, she paid no price for this.
Mhm.
But what they paid, and as others have pointed out, some people, well, that didn't really hit. Well, she didn't deny the number, right? She just said it was a difficult choice. Yeah, we think the price was worth it.
Yeah.
She paid no
She
price.
didn't deny the number.
Right.
500,000 children.
So then you look at this, you say the outright the cruelty and the barbarity of these savages in business suits on the banks of the Potomac is unfortunately unbridled and unabated. But that brings us back again to this topic about defend the guard. It's one of the many things that we need to get done, but it's a great unifying initiative that's doing the right thing, doing it the right way, and we do this along with sound money, end of the Fed type things, and
100%.
other things of that nature, and defending our right to freedom of speech, and calling them to account on some of these other things that are happening now. They're all important, but this is the number one thing that people can do, and everybody can get involved in this. And it doesn't matter what your political affiliation is. This is doing the right thing. And if you're like some of us who haven't served in the military, this is one way to say a tangible thank you, to maybe help to pay it forward to people that may not have to die otherwise, or might die otherwise if we don't get this thing enacted in all the states, and tell these people, before you take Americans and put them at risk overseas and put the overseas people at risk as well, you people in Washington do your damn jobs. And if you don't do your jobs, these people aren't going in. If our people in our state will not do what they're going to do and interpose and protect our National Guard personnel, then we'll deal with them politically as well.
Correct.
And I wanted to add, they, after 9/11, all we heard all the time was support the troops, and that really that meant was support sending the troops into war.
Well, if you're not with us, then you're with the terrorists.
You're with the terrorists. And we heard all of it. But
George W.
We're with the terrorists. We got to have a correct strategy.
Yeah, the whole idea was support the troops, and that was just a trope to get us to support unlimited military intervention in foreign wars. But how you really support the troops is you prevent them from being put into the meat grinder. There are so many different evil entities out there at the Pentagon and the federal government, lobbyists, defense contractors, $1 trillion industry that depends on all these people, the best among us, the most courageous among us, who sign up to serve in the military, for the most noble of purposes. Those people, their goodness is used against them, and then they find themselves in these situations that most of us can't fathom the horrors of what they go through. And if we really want to support the troops, then we'll support keeping them home, only sending them on wars that are absolutely necessary. And because Washington, D.C. is so corrupt and the corruption is so entrenched, and President Trump, we believe, is trying to do something to fix that, but it's such a gargantuan task. So we have to deal with it at the state level through Defend the Guard, and prompt them, deny them the resources to be able to do all these things. Because if they have the resources and are able to exploit them, they will. So we have to take that away from them.
Got to get back to states' rights. Dennis, what do you got?
Okay. one thing, and Dan maybe might have some insight on this or know who we would talk to about this, but one state National Guard in the federal union is doing something that really gets my attention, and I think it's horrible. That is in Oklahoma. And great people in Oklahoma, and I know Nathan Dahm is there. He was a state senator, right? And he's I think the chair of the Oklahoma GOP, works on a lot of good things.
Okay.
But Governor Stitt of Oklahoma has formed some sort of a personal relationship with one of the most evil people on the face of this earth.
Okay.
The bloody butcher from Baku, Ilham Aliyev. And I've read and seen numerous times where the Oklahoma National Guard people are training with Azerbaijan military. Azerbaijan is a genocidal, ethnic cleansing, ethnic expulsion terrorist state.
Murdering Christians.
That's right. They're bent on the final destruction of the oldest Christian nation in the world, the nation of Armenia, based on filthy lies with all their oil money and working with Turkey, getting weaponry from Israel and even some Eastern European nations that people might say, well, I would be surprised some of those countries would, but it's whatever. But that the Oklahoma National Guard is involved in this, to me, is so outrageous. I don't know anybody personally in Oklahoma. Maybe Dan or Diego or somebody in our movement is involved in Oklahoma, but I think that would be interesting to say, what the heck's going on there? Why would you do this sort of thing?
Right. You think the constituents of Oklahoma, the Republican rank and file voters of Oklahoma, do you think that's high on their radar of issues supporting Azerbaijan?
They'd probably be outraged if they knew about it.
Well, and just like Dan said, we got, the Arizona governor who cheated her way into that job, who's going over and doing deals with Yemen's neighbor. What was it? What was the country, Dan? Milan. Yeah. Oman. Yeah. You guys know geopolitics. Response to that, Dan? Any idea? And then I got three things for you after that.
Yep. So Governor Stitt, same thing as Katie Hobbs. They are in they don't call it a treaty because they know it never passed constitutional muster. They call it a state partnership program, and Oklahoma is in a partnership with Azerbaijan. Okay. Every state in the union is partners with probably 3 or 4 nations around the world. Every single state does this.
Wow.
And they do this so that the National Guard from, let's say, Idaho, and I believe our strategic alliance or partnership is with, I think ours is with the Philippines, so that we build these trusting relationships with these foreign governments. We commit to their military defense, to their training, not necessarily to fight their wars per se, but I guarantee if our partner was in war, we would be there with them, either materially or with bodies or with intelligence.
Right.
And we do that so that no matter where in the world there's a war, we've got a foothold so that we can deploy forces there and fight that war. To me, that program actually has a little bit of merit, more than having 900 bases around the world. But it's disgusting in the way we do it. Because we commit to their military defense. We commit to their strategic interests.
And not our own.
Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that we are beholden to any other nation on earth. And so it's a program that I think is the intent is better than the 900 bases around the world, but I still think it is overtly evil, and most people in the United States would never consent for their congressmen or senators to do that kind of a deal with our authority.
You got to believe.
So if you look into state partnership program, it's only been around for about 30 years.
Yeah,
and it went from 3 countries the first year to over, I think it's 200 and something nations around the globe that have National Guard alliances.
This is the first time I'm hearing that phraseology, Dan, as that
state partnership program.
State partnership program. But I'm looking at it and thinking, this is way beyond a sister city over in Japan. Right. This is ridiculous. And that if history's taught us anything, we truly study history. I mean, that's how we had the advisors, quote unquote, the advisors in Indochina. That led to having then troops on the ground. And the reality is the advisors were always the troops on the ground, no matter what they want to say, So I got 3 questions for you as we're moving forward here. First of all, where can people contact you? How can they look up National Guard or Defend the Guard?
We've got 2 websites. Our organizational website, which is Bring Our Troops Home. That's the organization. That's
Bring Our Troops Home. Okay. Yep. I saw that one. Bring our troops.
Our legislative effort is Defend the Guard. That's defendtheguard.us. If you want to know more about Defend the Guard in your state,
okay,
go to defendtheguard.us, click on the map of your state, and it'll pull up whoever your bill sponsor is.
Excellent.
There's a way to get in touch and become active. If there is no sponsor listed, you can refer your state representative to us, and we will reach out to them and to let them know that one of their constituents has suggested that they sponsor the Defend the Guard Act. Once we get our hooks into somebody, we will make them a champion. We'll put steel in their spine, and we'll go to war for them. And then lastly, on Twitter, obviously, at Troops Home US is our Twitter handle, or at Defend the Guard on Twitter. And we put most of our communications on X, Twitter, just because of the reach that it has.
Yeah.
But those are the easiest ways to reach us, though.
Excellent.
And if you go to any one of those websites, the first thing it's going to ask you to do is to enlist in our movement, a little play on words.
Yep.
And if you give us your email address, we will send you an email newsletter once or maybe twice a week if news is really cooking.
Excellent.
And it's really well written. Hunter Dorenzis, our communications director, he's our formal writer, and he does a fantastic job keeping people informed on progress in other states, calls to action to join the phone banking like Dennis does. We have this small ragtag army that are flipping committee votes in real time, and we're doing it with just a handful of volunteers. And so if you want to become involved in that, defendthegard.us/phone bank. Yeah. And you give us 15 minutes a week. Okay. During a very small period of the year.
Yeah. So there's the defendthegard.us. Bring our troops home. So that's a good, robust site there. And like you said, there's the map right there. So if I scan over that, probably if I click on it, let's see what it says. I'm in real time. There we go. Okay. So there's sponsors. You didn't see it on camera, but Dennis got all excited over there across the table from me. So there's some of our guys.
Some of the good guys
out there.
Steve Johnson, who's no longer serving, but he could come back if we can put enough pressure on him now that the laws changed. He was our original sponsor in Michigan, and he got the ball rolling. And we've got a great group up there right now.
Okay. Excellent. All right. So my next question for you, Dan, why did my button not work there? That button. I got to push the button twice apparently nowadays. I want to know. I want to go to your story. I want you to tell the story of the supplies, getting them to the troops. I want you to tell that story about the Afghanistan. But I want you to just take a couple minutes for me and for the audience out there, and give me the dynamic of this contrast between. It'll lead right into this story, and you don't even have to pause. Just go right into your story about how you approached. I can't remember who it was. It was one of your representatives, right? You'll tell the story, but I remember the gist of the story. Anyways, the contrast between how much, and Dennis articulated a little bit of this earlier, how much the suits and the military, all the contractors sitting in the buildings across from the Capitol, staring down at how little regard they have for the troops that are defending us, how little care and concern they have for the military, and then going in, and then how much you guys literally go into battle. And of course, it's God country, hoorah, rah, rah. But the reality is you're fighting for the guy next to you. And I just want you to dive into that as from your own personal experience, and then lead right into that story that you told at the 10th Amendment Awards of how pissed off you were, and just said, what the hell are you people doing? These guys, and you ruffled some feathers, and I love the story. So I want you to first dive into that, the suits versus the actual troops, and how the suits don't give a shit about the guys that are on the ground. They're just going to send them in cannon fodder, and you guys will die for each other. That's such a huge dichotomy, or a contrast of why the average person signs up, and what the military industrial complex, their agenda is. Go.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm very reticent to always talk about someone else's motives, but I can tell you that the men on the ground, the guys that raised our hand and swore an oath to defend the Constitution, defend our country, and to do it with up to including the value of our own lives, that creates a bond between the men and women in uniform. And when we are there, it is not about this greater concept of the Constitution, America, and freedom, all those things. We are literally fighting and standing tall in the breach for the man next to us. Any one of the people I served with, and this is without exception, would gladly take a round instead of having the guy next to them shot.
Absolutely.
Not everybody in the military has that opportunity to be shot at, and I don't use opportunity very loosely, because a lot of military occupational specialties are not war fighters, right? They're administrative, they're logistic, they're supply, they're maintenance. But to a person, we would gladly lay down our life for the man standing next to us. Now, I would never want to impugn the motives of the defense contractors and say that they don't have that same spirit of resistance, right, or brotherhood or camaraderie. But I
Right.
can tell you this: that any politician that swears an oath to the Constitution, they don't promise to do so with the value of their life.
Right.
They do it with a promise that if I don't honor the Constitution, you can remove me from office. And then they do everything they can to protect themselves from that fate.
Yeah.
So I will talk highly of the commitment of between men and women in uniform and their commitment to each other. And I will punt on the actual motives of those in the suits.
Fair
but I
enough.
can tell you this: we're not the same people.
Yeah, exactly. That, and I didn't need you to dive in and impute. You already mentioned some of the bigwigs that the forefront people, Obama and Bush and Cheney and all those people that are just, they're disgusting. I believed in the second Iraq war for about 3 to 4 months. And by the 6th month, I knew, I was like, this 9/11 and the justification. And I'm like, where's the correlation between 14 Saudi Arabians plus 5 other official story guys taking down these buildings, these steel buildings, in the first time in history that they've ever fallen in almost free fall, that whole dynamic. And I go, and we're going into Iraq for what? We're going to Afghanistan for what? What are we doing?
That's like going into war in Afghanistan to fight Chechens. I still don't even know what the relation was. Saudis attacked us. We go to Afghanistan and we fight Chechens.
It doesn't make any sense.
That you can't even make a mathematical equation.
And you go, and then you watch some documentaries or something like that, and the bravery of the men that went and served, you can't help but have complete compassion and empathy and all of the emotions that you have, and go, you guys were. It's like, how do you continue to honor that service and know that the war was complete bullshit? It's like that I think, to me, is one of the most demoralizing thing, is knowing, I mean, every time, I didn't do the disclaimer tonight, but every time on the show, we give our disclaimers where we salute our troops. We thank them for their service. But I know from really even before World War II, because that was a lot of engineered stuff, even though there was the greatest generation. But I mean, all of these conflicts, at the end of it, there's not a truly righteous justification for these things, even though the guys that are going lay down their lives, as Christ said, it's no greater love has no man than this, they lay down his life for his brother. The guy, man after man, is doing this in the field in an unjust situation. How much greater is that level of laying down your life when you realize, that
purest form of love.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right.
And where I'm laying it down and giving my purest form of love is ultimately not something that, if I had a clear understanding of it beforehand, would have ever went for. Yep, I would have said, no, this is not right. And yet you're in the war of conflict and you do the best to survive. And I think that's some of the biggest, we haven't gotten language, but I think it's one of the biggest mind fucks that they do for the troops, is to send them into these places of unjust war, and then play on their sense of
and parade them around the country.
Yeah, they parade them around the country, and they
time of the Super Bowl and fly jets over.
Yeah, and these are guys that I think of. I don't know how much you're familiar with Pat Tillman, but I think of that one and what came out with him being basically fragged because he was about to expose a lot of stuff, and that's one story.
His best friend was his college teammate and quarterback Jake Plummer, who was my best friend in high school.
Oh wow!
I know.
So you're very familiar with that.
Very, very familiar. And
okay.
And Jake started a foundation to honor Pat Tillman, and it took such a heavy toll on him after a couple of years because of just the weight of losing his brother.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, when I got to Afghanistan, we flew from Salerno base out to where Pat had been killed.
Mm-hmm.
As part of, we had to fly people out there to do the investigation, and we were told on the ground at the time he was killed by friendly fire, and that story has disappeared. And he was killed by his own team.
Right.
And through confusion and just the fog of war. And instead they bring him home, and the NFL parades him out, and they put his picture up every time there's a game that's got national attention. They parade Pat around.
Yeah.
He left, first of all, he left the evils of that society to serve in a pure capacity, to be with his brother.
Yes.
And join the Ranger Battalion to be with his brother. And to have his image and his memory paraded around to propagate and to promote more war, I find to be absolutely disgusting.
It's absolutely abhorrent. Dennis, did you have something for I have him tell the story?
Oh no, well, just and the terrible toll this took on the family, and particularly the lies they heard from the Defense Department and the government and that sort of thing, and it was just just awful. But yeah, a true hero.
Yeah.
And
is there
horrible situation?
Dan, is there still? I know we know for sure that it was friendly fire, fog of war, but is there still ongoing misunderstanding about actually what was going? Because I've heard one group will come out and say that he was targeted, and other groups will say it was just fog of war. Do you have any opinion on that or insight on that, or do you know where that stands?
I'll tell you my own personal belief on it, that there is not a single member of the United States military that would willfully shoot another member of the military.
Okay, I'll take that. And that's what I want to believe. That's absolutely what I want to believe.
I think I have to believe that, just to have that glimmer of hope that there is still good in humanity.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where I'm going to hang my hat. But if you want, I'll move into the story because it kind of ties in actually really well.
No, yeah, and I'll just say this: we always want to have that default with our military, the line, the serving man on the ground. But you also understand that there's sometime David's watching somebody's wife on the roof and decides to send somebody into a battle that they should have never been sent in, so that they can benefit from it. And so you always have to do that due diligence and investigation. But tell us this story. This is such an awesome story, and I'll kind of cap up what we've been talking about this whole time, because I love the way you tell this story. Well, the one time I heard you tell this story at the 10th Amendment. So please tell it to our audience again tonight, Dan.
Yep, absolutely. So I was in the Marine Corps in the 90s, and then I transferred in the Army after Bill Clinton tried to defund the Marine Corps in 94, 95. And so I did a hitch in the Army, and then I got out and came home and enrolled in Boise State University, working on my business degree. And then we were attacked on September 11th. And I joined back up at the Idaho National Guard the next day on the 12th, because the National Guard from Idaho has Apache helicopters. And I knew that we would be called on to go avenge America, that we were going to go fight whoever had done this horrible thing to our country. And so I joined the National Guard. And in September of 2005, I get called at 4 a.m. Sergeant McKnight, we need you to lead a convoy of Idaho National Guardsmen 2,500 miles to Louisiana. We need you to take emergency supplies to Hurricane Katrina, because the Louisiana National Guard is absent and Hurricane Katrina has just hit. So we led a convoy. I think there were 15 trucks, supplies, fuel down there. We got there, dropped everything off. They gave us instructions to drive straight to Fort Hood, Texas, where we dropped off our equipment, and we picked up our orders to go to Afghanistan on the same trip. So we, from Idaho to Louisiana to Fort Hood, Texas, orders to Afghanistan. We flew home, picked up our equipment, flew back to Fort Hood, and then off to Afghanistan.
Wow.
And while I was there, the day before we left, we were at Fort Hood. Five friends of mine from Idaho, we were so gung-ho on this mission, this concept of defending America.
Mm-hmm.
We actually found President Bush's ranch in Crawford, Texas, and drove a little van that we had bought, a piece of garbage van that we bought because we were there training for so long. And we drove to Crawford, Texas, right to the front gates of President Bush's ranch. We wanted to tell him, we're going to go win the war, and we're going to do it for W. You're our guy. And true story, the Secret Service stops us at the gate, and they radio back to the house, and old W comes out and waves from his front door, and we were all jacked up. We're ready to go kill Osama bin Laden. We were ready to go. We were going to bite the head off the snake. And we get into Afghanistan, and the National Guard at that point in time was fairly a novel idea of the National Guard serving in these active duty components, being embedded with historically active forces. So we were tied to the 10th Mountain Division out of New York and the 82nd Airborne Division, two storied military divisions.
Yeah.
Neither one wanted us. We were National Guard. We were less than them. We were part-time soldiers.
Right.
Even though we were providing the Apache helicopter air cover for the ground troops that were engaged in daily activities. And after I took a team from Wisconsin, 12 Catholic German National Guardsmen from Wisconsin, and I was their team leader. We went out to these far remote places in the Hindu Kush and the northeast quadrant of Afghanistan, and we built these forward operating bases with no security, no detail, just a single strand of concertina wire to protect us from the locals. And we would start building these bases up so the Apaches could land, rearm, refuel, and go carry on the mission.
Okay.
And after about a month, our supplies were depleted. Our uniforms were torn. Our boots were worn out. Our body armor was starting to fail. Our helmets were destroyed. And we started calling and trying to get new equipment, new supplies, and we couldn't get it from anybody, not from 10th Mountain, not from 82nd, not from the National Guard chain of command, nobody. And out of frustration, I did the only thing that I know how to do as a stubborn former Marine and a non-commissioned officer, leader of men. I grabbed a satellite phone and I climbed to the top of the nearest mountain that I could get a real clear signal. And I called my friend that I knew had some political connections. And his name happened to be Gary Glenn, who is the Michigander we spoke about earlier.
Okay.
He was in Idaho. He'd run for Congress against a man named Jim Risch. And Jim Risch had just been appointed governor. He was our lieutenant governor. And he'd just been appointed governor about the time we were in Afghanistan. And I asked Gary, I go, Gary, what do I do? I can't get supplies. My men are suffering. And he said, Dan, the answer's in the Constitution. And I'm like, Gary, now's not the time. I don't need the civics lesson. But he did. He's like, the answer's in the Constitution. Your governor is the commander-in-chief of the Idaho National Guard. Call him. And I said, all right, whatever. Give me his number. So he gave me his number, and I called Governor Jim Risch.
Okay.
And he answered. And he said, hello. And I said, Governor Risch, this is Sergeant Dan McKnight. I'm a member of the Idaho Army National Guard. I'm calling you from a mountaintop deep in northeastern Afghanistan. I hope I have your attention. And I did. And I went on to tell him the story. And
Maybe.
he said, Dan, I don't know what I'm going to do. I was just appointed governor a minute ago. It's literally been a week. But I do know that I am the commander-in-chief of the National Guard. And you have my word. I will do something. I was satisfied. I hung up the phone. I climbed back down the mountain, went to the base, and 48 hours later, my battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel, kicked the door into my room, demanding to know who I had called because I'd violated the chain of command, pissed off, but he told me, your supplies are on the way from Idaho. 2 shipping containers full of the things you need are on their way.
Mm-hmm.
Give me your satellite phone, right? So he took it away from me. Don't show up the chain of command. That's rule number 1 in the military. And so I held Jim Risch up on this pedestal. He was a hero.
Right.
He understood the Constitution. He supported the men in uniform. He supported the mission, and he was a man of action. And over the rest of the war, I became very disillusioned with the war because we went through military strategy, shock and awe, and counterinsurgency and provincial reconstruction. We just kept changing strategies every time a new officer would take charge.
Right.
And at the end of my tour there, after 18 months, I thought, what in the hell did we accomplish?
Yeah.
We didn't do anything. We built schools and turned them over to the Taliban, and they're now their war centers. You know, we built water treatment facilities and we turned them over to the Taliban, and now they use it only to supply themselves.
Right.
So I came home pissed off, and I was hurt. I got injured when I was there the last month, and I couldn't get treatment from the VA. It took 3 years to get a surgery. I became very unhealthy, mentally, physically. I ballooned up to over 300 pounds. I had a beard down to my waist.
Wow.
And I decided I was done with society. I was done. And I lost my family. I lost a business that I had started. I'd lost my home. I was literally at the bottom, the as low as you could get. Mm-hmm. We've all heard the story. We know the 22 a day figures and all those things. I was right in line with falling into those statistics. But I started to hear in 2015 these phrases that resonated with me. Endless wars, regime change wars, stupid wars. And it was being spoken by an orange man that had just come down a gold escalator, and by a Democratic presidential nominee named Tulsi Gabbard. So Trump and Tulsi together were starting to say things that resonated in my heart.
Yep.
And I said, you know what? I'm going to start paying attention a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Trump wins, right? Tulsi gets kicked out of the party. And in 2019, the Republicans took control of the Senate. And a name that I hadn't heard in a while was now a senator from Idaho, Jim Risch. He wasn't the governor anymore. He was a senator. And when the Republicans retook control of the Senate, he became the chairman of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations. And I thought, my God, Jim Risch,
here's the
my
opportunity.
hero,
Yeah,
is now the 3rd or 4th most powerful man in American foreign policy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask him to help. I'm going to do it again. I didn't have to climb a hill though. I didn't have a satellite phone. I didn't have his number anymore. So I did the only thing a Marine knows how to do, and I got out my box of crayons and I wrote out in my best penmanship a op-ed.
You didn't eat any of those crayons, did you?
I ate most of them. Yes,
okay.
I'll admit it.
All right, just double checking.
I wrote in red though because the red one's a little bit bitter. I submitted the op-ed to my local newspaper, and 9 newspapers in my state picked up my op-ed and ran it. I don't know if it was to mock my lack of writing skills or what, but
they like crayon.
I challenged. What's that?
They like crayon.
It's pretty. It was
pretty.
And basically, the op-ed challenged Jim Risch as the chairman of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations to honor his oath and to at least try for peace.
Yeah.
Just try. Give it a shot.
Give it a shot.
And he came back to Boise and did an event with the Chamber of Commerce. And I grabbed a buddy of mine who had a camera, and I said, hey, we're going to go to this event. And when I pop up in the audience, start filming. And I waited patiently for Jim Risch to give his speech and do all the normal government speak and blah, 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 and stuff that nobody really cares about.
Yeah.
And at the end, he said, I have time for one question. And I jumped up.
Of course.
And I said, Senator Risch, my name is Dan McKnight. You helped me back in 2005 when I was in Afghanistan. He stopped me right there in front of this room of 1,500 people, 1,000 people, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Said, Dan, I remember you. I remember that situation in Afghanistan. I read your op-ed. I agree with you. We are done with nation building. We are through sending our resources, our troops, our equipment, our money to a country that simply doesn't want us there. I thought, my God, this is easy. I'm 2 for 2. All you have to do is ask these people. They truly care. And Jim Risch jumped on an airplane and went back to Washington, D.C., and I was brushing my collar. I was feeling pretty good about myself.
Yeah.
And the reason I'd done all this, by the way, my best friend that I deployed with was going back for his 7th combat tour as a National Guardsman. That's kind of what spawned this action.
Okay.
Jim Risch went back to D.C., and 3 times in the next 90 days voted to extend the wars indefinitely in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Yemen. Okay, this is a mistake. Something happened. What was it? So we raised a little bit of money. We took 100 lawmakers from around the country and 100 veterans back to D.C., and we said, we're going to have this event. And we're just going to go into their offices, and everyone's just going to plead the case. Let's try peace. We're all veterans. We've all served. Here are our stories. Here are the pain, the misery, all the things that go with it, the frustration, and just ask them to try for peace. And we did it. We sent everybody to see their congressmen or their senators. And one of the meetings we sat in was with Liz Cheney.
She's a peach.
In Wyoming. And it was one of our founders of our organization, Bring Our Troops Home. He sat in there and he said, Liz, I really want you to try for peace. What conditions on the ground have to be met in Afghanistan for us to come home? And she looked him dead in the eye. And she says, Tyler, as long as I'm here in Washington, D.C., we will never, ever come home from Afghanistan. And we regrouped right after that. And we said, to hell with D.C.
Yeah.
We can't fight in the swamps.
Yeah.
And when we decided we were going to use
got to do it state to state
and strategy and go back to the states and fight in Phoenix and Boise and Bismarck and Pierre instead of in DC. And that's how we started the organization, Bring Our Troops Home, and the Defend the Guard movement. And from there, been nothing but an uphill battle since. So
of course. Well, you were 2 for 2 and excited about it, and then
that's right.
You hit that roadblock. Did you ever find out what the senator's true motivation was in voting 3 times to extend the Afghanistan?
Oh, sure. So Jim Risch, nobody in the country knows who Jim Risch is, even though he is today the chairman of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations. Nobody knows him.
Okay.
But when Jim Risch travels internationally, he's treated like a king. Every country he goes to, he is treated like royalty. He's this 5'1". He's a little man.
And, so he's got a Napoleon complex.
Absolutely. And when we sat in his office, and I took the lieutenant governor from Idaho and 2 legislators from Idaho, plus a handful of veterans, we sat in his office in D.C. He could care less about what we were there to talk about. I have a picture of it where he's slouched in his chair. His feet are way out in front of him. He's got his hands behind his head and he's leaning back. Couldn't care less about what we were there to talk about. And so he in the country here, nobody knows who he is, but he uses his influence as the chairman of that committee. First of all, USAID is under his purview and has been for 6 of the last 8 years.
Oh, wow.
So draw your own conclusions.
Yeah.
So does he have motivation to keep the wars going? Damn right he does. And he speaks a big game. He claims to be an America First patriot until it's time to vote America First. And when he goes to these countries overseas, he is treated like royalty. And I think he's 82 years old. He's going to die in office. He's got 1 more re-election next year. Nobody can run against him. He's got $100 million in the war chest. And he's never held a private sector job since the mid-'70s when he was a prosecutor, county prosecutor.
Which is not really a private sector in
itself. He was the wealthiest senator in the country. And so you tell me how that happens.
And a lot of these people who get these privileged, Senate committee chairmanships, the people who they're put in these roles, they're the ones that they know will play ball. They know that the ones who want the notoriety, they want to exploit, all the different benefits that they can get from that position. And that's why they're handpicked for these roles, because they're going to play ball with all the special interests and look out for what's best for them. So going through that process is not the way to go, because unless you have a billionaire who's willing to spend money at crazy levels, you'll be lucky to, you might be able to get a token perfunctory meeting with them,
right?
But they're just going to laugh you off unless you have some sort of massive amount of money. And even if you had all that money, you still will never only be a fraction of the money that the military industrial complex has in a composite.
Well, one time buyout from somebody like that it doesn't compare to a perpetual money machine that just hands you, we keep asking this question, and I didn't know this. The AID, that was one of the first USA aid. That was one of the first things slashed under this newest Trump administration. And I love that dynamic. And to find out that this is one of the guys. Yeah. So you understand, look, getting you some new equipment, some new boots, some new clothing there in Afghanistan. Of course, we got to take care of our troops. They're over there fighting hardcore. And then you come back and go, hey, you write an op-ed. Of course, that's good PR. Everybody read it, everything like that. And then when he goes to vote, how many of those people, those 1,000 people in that audience that saw you stand up there, or the people that tuned in, to the video that I'm sure you posted after that, how many of those people, what's the percentage of those people that actually knew that he then voted? I mean, they may know now because you've gotten the word out, but in the immediacy of that incident, how many of them knew that he voted 3 times immediately after saying, "Oh, I loved your op-ed. Yeah, good job. It was great."
It's zero.
Yeah, zero. Yeah, they didn't know.
In that meeting, the funny thing about it is, and I have a picture of this. While at that meeting, two of the people I saw after the meeting was the state of Idaho Adjutant General Mike Garshak, who was a mid-level officer in the National Guard when I was in Afghanistan. He's now the Adjutant General. He was there in that meeting. And my battalion commander that kicked my door in and took away my satellite phone was his chief of staff. Those 2 men were at that meeting where I questioned Jim Risch, and both of them found me after the meeting. And, hey, it's good to see you, Sergeant McKnight. It's been a while. I love your question. We love the fight. We love the effort. We've seen some of your social media posts. Keep up the fight. Keep it up. But they're also the biggest opponents to Defend the Guard. They're the ones that march through the halls of the state capitol building lobbying against the Defend the Guard bill.
Of course.
And so it just shows you that the
abject hypocrisy.
Two sides of their mouth.
Well, it's the abject hypocrisy, and it truly goes back to scripture that says the love of money is the root of all evil. It's not money that's evil. We can use money for great things. We can use money. It's just a tool. But when you love money, when you fall in love with that money and that gravy train, and you realize that when you just look at the base salary of a senator, a U.S. senator, a U.S. congressman, and then you look at their net worth after getting in office, somebody's paying you.
Nobody cries more about this than old Dan Crenshaw, Eye Patch McCain down in Texas.
Yeah.
Nobody cries more about people calling him out for his stock portfolios. That man sheds crocodile tears whenever anybody points out that he makes $140,000 a year and he's worth $15 million.
Yeah. Dude, that guy's demonic. That guy is really...
He's the most evil member of Congress, and there's no second place. Not even close.
Not even close. And we're talking about Liz Cheney being in that category. We go, all right, yeah.
Well, where's the Lindsey Graham?
Lindsey Graham is just about as bad. You're right. Okay, Dennis, you're right. But let me finish the story.
Lindsey's compromised a little bit more. Go ahead, Dan. Finish the story.
So after Liz told us that as long as she was in D.C., we would never come home from Afghanistan. We came up with a twofold mission. 1, defeat Liz Cheney. 2, find a way to fight in the states. And we did. We sent activists into Wyoming, into every single county in Wyoming, and worked with the Republican establishment, the organizational structure of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And got her censured in every single county in Wyoming, except for one, Jackson Hole, where all the liberals lived.
Yep.
And got them to strip all institutional support, all money, all door knocking efforts, all re-election efforts for Liz Cheney. And then we started throwing all of our support behind Harriet Hagman, who is a fantastic replacement. You want to talk about flipping the script.
Right.
We go from Liz Cheney to Harriet Hagman, and we defeated her, and we beat her by 40 points in the primary just by shining daylight.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what the percentage
and what she had to do.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what the percentage was, because she got decimated.
Yeah, she got slacked. It was a 40-point primary victory to a relative unknown. It was incredible.
Yeah, and that's what we have to start doing. We have to start holding the existing office holders, because it's been bandied about, talked about in our, here on the show, that by the time you start a recall effort of the average representative, not a senator but a representative, by the time you get the recall going because of something they voted for, you're already into the next election. So you just primary that. You don't even focus on that. You just primary them. You just find a candidate.
Recalls are almost non-existent. The only people that get recalled are Republicans by Republicans.
Right. We attack our own for sure. And there's some justification in that every once in a while, but the reality is, Dan, this has been phenomenal with you. We're coming up on 8 o'clock. You've been with us roughly 2 hours. Well, we started a little late, and then we had a little audio, a little difficulties. Now this thing's stable. Now it's good, and we're on a roll. You're welcome to stick with us, but I want to shift gears. So I want to give you. I'm not shutting you down or anyway, but some final thoughts, and I want you to really plug this. Defend the Guard and everything that you're doing, and get the word out there, because we just had a meeting here a week ago on a Saturday. One of our local guys is really involved in politics, and in our county, we got a little disillusioned with some of the shenanigans going on in our local Republican Party, which happens. And what we're doing is we're not trying to circumvent them. We're just continuing the fight without needing that overseer mechanism necessarily involved, not excluding them, but at the same time, we're like, you know what, you want to do your thing and have your, do this. And what I loved was you talked just this last thing, talking about getting rid of Liz Cheney, is you had all these people out on the paper, and you said it earlier in our conversation too, about it takes 15 minutes. It takes 10 minutes. And this meeting we had here, it was a get together. We had a potluck basically. And then, we spoke a couple times. I got on my guitar and played some songs for everybody. And we just hung out. It was only a couple hours here hanging out at the man cave. And the overall dynamic was that we are going to keep standing for what we believe in, but we don't need the huge mechanism of the parties and all of this other stuff going on to be able to make meaningful change go on. And I love what you're doing with the Defend the Guard, because you're just asking some people, give me 5 minutes, give me 10 minutes, give me 15 minutes, and call these representatives. That whole map that you have on there on defendtheguard.us, just where they can click on that, they know the representatives. It could take you 5 minutes to call into their switchboard, or usually a direct number, call their secretaries and go, I just like to leave a message for a representative, and I tell them I appreciate they're doing this and appreciate them supporting this, because we've got to stop these foreign entanglements. And one of the ways that we're going to stop foreign entanglements and keep our National Guard home for our nation, National Guard guarding the nation, is to have them at the ready, be fully equipped, but realize their job is to work to defend our nation, not to make partnerships over in foreign countries and be deployed over there to come back wounded, broken, traumatized, and demoralized when they get back, realizing that they were sent forth because some politician had some agenda to make a couple $1 million off some land grab or some resource or some other bullshit, whatever they want to come up with. We've got to keep hammering this message. This is just another avenue where we got to keep hammering and going, we got to stop being involved overseas, and we've got to defend our nation. They fought us so hard, the Democrats, for the last 4 years, destroying the wall after Trump, tried to build it and had the lowest rates. And it's just amazing to me. And you mentioned it multiple times, Dan, that we're sending troops over there to defend these other nations and their borders. And yet we're not defending our own. And that's truly one of the roles, correct me if I'm wrong, truly one of the roles of the National Guard is to be deployed on our borders to defend it. And I kind of bounce that out as like, what's the difference? Standing army? Isn't it truly the role of the National Guard to be the border defense?
To repel an invasion, absolutely. It's one of three purposes it's listed: repel an invasion, suppress an insurrection, and put down an insurrection, repel an invasion, and to enforce the laws of the Union. That's it. That's the constitutional purpose of the militia.
Wow. So you think that when Trump offered up the National Guard, 20,000 National Guard troops on January 6th, and Nancy Pelosi and Mayor Bowser turned him down, that they were in violation of the constitutional, not authority, it was already authority was already there, but the constitutional mandate, if you will.
Absolutely.
And they turned him down, and then, it was a big attack.
Their first and primary purpose is to ensure the safety and the security of American lives and property. That's their first responsibility.
100%. 100%. You had a quick question?
Yeah, just a very quick observation. As Dan pointed out, to enforce the laws of the nation, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the supreme law of the land? The Constitution and laws made in pursuance thereof. So this is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're talking about right here constitutional law enforcement by the people.
Yes.
And enforcing the Constitution is one of the jobs, because that's the supreme law of the land, of the militia, of the state National Guard people.
Yeah, 100%. So Dan, any final thoughts? And I'm not saying you have to go. I don't know what your time schedule was. We didn't have that discussion beforehand. We're going to continue on till about 9 o'clock ish with the rest of it. And Dennis has got a bunch of things, and Shane have got a bunch of things. You're welcome to stay with us and pontificate with us on that stuff. But I wanted to at least give you a final thought. And if you need to go, we can do that. But I want you to give us kind of your final thoughts or a synopsis of what or even a plug, whatever you want to do, just to kind of wrap up this section of talking about defending the guard and the great work that you're doing. And what I love is I've had a lot of experience with a lot of veterans and a lot of other causes. And I want to be, and I'm with them, and I want to be so passionate, and I want to be involved. But you were, and so that lends a monicum of authority, or at least contextual understanding that other people can't have. I can sit here and talk about defend the guard all day long and tell my people, listen, reach out, here's the map, do all this stuff. But you, having been on both sides of it, having been an enlisted Marines, correct? And then having been in the guard and being redeployed out there and dealing with that, and then coming back disillusioned and saying, this is bullshit. That perspective is priceless. You can't manufacture that. And I don't want to ever overstep that dynamic. I want to fully support it, but I want to ever overstep that dynamic and saying, this guy, Dan, this guy, and the people that he's associated with that have also served that are with him, when they talk about defending the guard and saying, we got to stop this foreign entanglement and these bullshit deployments, and we've got to build up our National Guard to the point that they can defend our nation, but not send them to these foreign theaters of not declared war, but these foreign theaters to defend somebody else's fucking goat herding. I don't get it. And so I want you to wrap this into a nice, pretty bow with us with some Star Spangles on it and whatever you want to do, Dan.
Well, first of all, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity to come here. And Dennis, thank you so much. And Shane, first of all, Dennis, you guys know what you have a treasure in Dennis in Michigan. The guy has more information in his brain than any one person could extrapolate over a lifetime.
Dude, the way he can count off the senators, the senator in that state, and this guy over here, and this Republican, and you remember that guy. I'm like, dude, I thought I had a steel trap. This guy is incredible. Go ahead, Dan.
Lifetime Achievement Award winner
at the RNC this year, and he started piping off on some Pat Buchanan stuff that I thought I was the only nerd that knew, and I was just impressed with what came out of his mouth. It was incredible.
You never underestimate that guy.
Never. But we believe in this concept, and Dennis exudes this. I believe that my lever of influence is strongest closer to the fulcrum, right? We all understand physics. And my fulcrum happens to be in Eagle, Idaho. And the place I'm trying to influence happens to be my representative that lives 1.5 miles from my house. So my lever of influence is closer right now where I sit than it is with anybody in Washington, D.C. And so this concept that we've come up with is called lift where you stand. Don't try and fight a war in somebody else's front yard. Fight it in yours. You have more influence over your state representative, your state senators, than you will ever in Washington, D.C. And if you don't believe me, when you see them at the grocery store or see them at school dropping your kids off at the same place, or maybe even go to the same church, go talk to them about anything and tell me that they don't have your best interest at heart. And if they don't, replace them, because it's only a 7,000 vote requirement to get rid of somebody in most state legislative districts.
Yeah.
So lift where you stand, fight the fight in your own front yard. Defend the guard is the front yard fight of today. It's the most important state-based legislation you'll find anywhere in the country. Considering we're in a renaissance of state rights right now, that's a pretty bold statement. You look at concealed carry or constitutional carry. You look at the abortion being punted back to the states. You look at legalization of drugs being pushed to the states. We are in a renaissance of the 10th Amendment right now.
100%.
If we don't learn how to maximize our influence in that, we will never have another opportunity, because once that's gone, it's gone. And the Constitution is hanging by a thread, and it's going to require the men. And I apologize, this is not meant to be a sexist statement, but the men, the Midwestern, barrel-chested, broad-shouldered men that have won World War I and II, that have defended our country, that expanded our country from coast to coast, that build the infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, the factories.
Yep.
It's going to take the men to stand up.
100%.
And right now, the men in a lot of states are standing behind people like Wendy Rogers, a female veteran. They're standing behind her and letting her fight.
Yeah.
And I challenged the chairman in the House of Representatives in Arizona, who is a 35-year command sergeant major, who was an obstructionist to our bill, who became a supporter and a sponsor of it. I challenged him. I said, Sergeant Major, where are the men? Why are you standing behind Wendy Rogers, female lieutenant colonel? Why aren't you out front fighting this fight and defending our country? Because if we don't do it now, we're never going to have the opportunity. If you want to be a skinny jeans wearing latte drinking guy in San Francisco, go be that guy, but don't pretend.
Don't pretend.
I don't want to pretend men. This is a man's fight, and that's not meant to be a sexist statement. The men are going to have to stand up and fight for this country, and this is the time, and this is the fight.
That is excellent. That is excellent. And I appreciate that, Dan. And we've got to move away from this dynamic of, listen, I've never pushed out a baby. Never have. And that's some excruciating pain that I don't ever want to deal with. But you know what? Just like the father there in Butler, Pennsylvania, what do men do? Men take the bullets. Men shield the family. You know, it's like men. Here's my phrase for tonight. Recap what you said. I don't even want to step on it, but men take the bullets. Women produce the babies. There's two different dynamics of strength, and we've got to stop with this bullshit leftist ideology of commingling this. No. Women have a strength to manage a household, to birth children, to advise their husbands, to be parts of the community that men are not designed for. Men are supposed to be out there making decisions, taking the bullets, protecting their home, providing for their home. And that's just the reality of who God created us to be. And we've got to stop. But it's prevalent in our society where we've been so conditioned that we're like, women out there, every once in a while, there is a Joan of Arc. There's absolutely a Joan of Arc that gets out there and kicks ass. But the vast majority of them are a Ruth, who at her last point of desperation is inspired by her mother-in-law to go and lay at the feet of the man of the manor and then become the new the wife. There's Esthers that go before the king even though it could cost her life, and she goes there and then he extends the scepter and she saves her nation. There's these dynamics of strong women, but we've got to stop thinking them as being Laura Croft and whatever. We've got to, yes, there are some women that can kick some ass. I don't want to dance with Ronda Rousey. She would beat the shit out of me. But the vast majority of women, you know what? They're designed with the strength to bear children and build a family and be the badasses that they are. I watch my daughter just kick ass every day and fight this and fight that and deal with this and deal with that. She's a badass, and she don't have to she don't have to pull a gun out. She don't have to raise her fists in that type of dynamic. She's got to deal with 3 children. She's got to deal with her household. That's a strength. When I'm at a job site swinging a fucking hammer, it doesn't equate. Swinging a hammer and dealing with some guy that I can fire in 10 minutes doesn't equate with a child that's being rebellious right in front of me that I know I have to love and guide and try to make into the best person that they can be, so that they're not only a benefit to society, but a benefit to themselves and an honor to their family. That's a dynamic that we've got to understand.
They have to put up with us.
And they got to put up with us.
They have to mentor, guide, and lead us. As men, we are commanded that our wife is our partner.
100%.
They're an equal. Our role is to defend, and the country is defending right now.
You're exactly right. Yeah. I think of the mafia. The mafia is one of the best perverted examples of the husband and wife dynamic, to where the mafia boss has a consigliere, his chief advisor. He's the only one that can really tell the boss, hey, you're kind of fucking up, boss. I don't think you ought to do this. And that's the perversion of what God created us with our wives. We are the ones that men have to make the decision. But our chief counselor, our chief sounding board, our chief consigliere is our wives. They're the ones that are sitting behind that defensive shield, assessing the battle and going, honey, I see this over here. I see that over there. I see this over here. And then men move forward in it. And when you operate in that partnership, it is so fucking awesome.
Yep, it's rocket fuel. It's adding nitrous to oxide and making that rocket fuel explode.
It is.
Absolutely.
Happy wife, happy life.
Exactly.
And,
Shane.
Guys, I appreciate the offer to stick around.
No.
11 days ago, I literally had life-saving surgery.
I heard
and-
that. Shane
Yep,
told
and
me
so I'm
off air.
struggling at the moment.
Okay.
Right.
No, I appreciate all the time you've given us, Dan. It was awesome. Sorry for
Yeah,
the
great.
difficulties at the beginning of the show. Once we got it ironed out, it hadn't failed us in the last hour and 15 minutes. So it's good. Dan, I appreciate it. You need to come back, give us updates. I'll make Shane set that up. And we'll do that moving forward. Once again, defendtheguard.us. That's one of the main sites. Give us your Twitter handle again, and you had an alternate site.
Yep, at Troops Home US is the Twitter handle, and then bringourtroopshome.us is the organizational website.
Okay, I'm gonna see if my guys over there can maybe post that in the chat if they can get a chance to do that. But thank you, Dan. We'll let you
Guys,
go,
easy.
and we appreciate you so much for coming on the show with us. And I think we're gonna take Larry. We got a quick break, but Dan, we'll let you go, and then we're gonna go to we'll let you go.
Thanks,
How about
Dan.
that?
Thank
Thanks,
you so
Dan.
much.
Appreciate
Appreciate
it so much.
Bye, Dan.
Bye. Take care, Dennis. Bye, Shane.
All right, gentlemen, you ready to go to break?
We
Yep,
are.
Yep.
This is my break.
Sorry.
I don't know what this one is.
I don't know.
DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, is now focusing on FEMA, the Federal
I
Emergency
don't care.
Mismanagement Agency, which you may recall wasted all of their money funding illegal aliens, putting them up in fancy hotels in New York City and Manhattan, across the country. And so they didn't have any money when Hurricane Helene hit the East Coast.
FEMA is going to be playing a pivotal role in our shelter and services program that is poised to distribute $363 million
To the criminal invader, illegal aliens.
to cities and communities in need of funding.
And then they wondered why this happened.
We do not have the funds. FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the season.
Of course not, but thank God for Doge, who, if they haven't already, will soon discover the people responsible for making those payments, and they're going to
Where do
be
you live?
fired. Few Americans know that in New York, under the Biden administration, 20% of the hotels in New York City, including in Manhattan, which is ridiculously expensive, were being used to house the criminal invaders. And speaking of criminal invaders, it's long overdue that Ilhan Omar be investigated for the alleged immigration fraud by apparently marrying her brother so that he could get papers to then stay in the United States. The Marxist Democrats and their mouthpieces in the media are increasingly upset about Doge, obviously, and now the 19-year-old who goes by the handle Big Balls, who's part of the Doge team, now has a State Department email address, since he is a staffer now for a government agency.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with Musk and Big Balls.
Anderson Cooper's favorite topic.
Big balls.
Big balls.
Big Balls, who work for Elon Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency, Doge.
The so-called Department of Government Efficiency. Sure looks like things are getting an awful more efficient to me.
Doge.
In the one case of the Big Balls kid, a literal teenager.
Big balls online. Big balls here that Katie's talking about. A 19-year-old that goes by the username Big Balls. So that would be one way that we could refer to him.
Literally every day, these lunatics are getting increasingly unhinged. Here is Democrat Congressman Kwesi Mafum, or however you pronounce this loser's name, from Maryland.
This will be a congressional fight, a constitutional fight, a legal fight.
In order to stop cutting government waste. That's what they're upset about.
And on days like this, a street fight. Yes, we will stand.
That's what communists do. They organize useful idiots into angry mobs to threaten and intimidate normal people in whatever country it is they're trying to overthrow because, well, normal people don't want anything to do with the commies. Here is a reverend at a Baptist church in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
And in this nation, I'm worried that we are on the verge of bloodshed.
Yes, that's why we need to round up and arrest those on the left who are making such ridiculous threats.
This is an attempt to take us back to a day that we do not want to go and we will not go.
Where the government was efficient and the budget was balanced?
Therefore, there will be conflict. I pray that the peace of God will win out and overcome the madness that is attempting to take over this nation. And I will say to you, beloved, no one likes violence, but sometimes violence is necessary. When Elon Musk forces his way into the United States Treasury and threatens to steal your personal information and your Social Security check, there is the possibility of violence. Sometimes the devil will act so ugly that you have no other choice but to get violent.
Speaking of the devil, he's standing at that podium right there.
I'm going to try my best not to preach.
Yeah, sister, you go, girl.
I just want to say thank you, because every day that we show up in D.C., we show up for you. We know who we work for.
You work for the illegal aliens, but thankfully we're rounding them up and deporting them.
We know that we work for the American people. And what we're not going to do is stand around while they pull this bullshit that they trying to pull right now.
Okay. Excuse me, you ratchet hoe. We don't use language like that around here.
This is why I'm not going to be able to preach, because I probably won't be able to stop cussing. But let me tell y'all something. I know some of y'all have been frustrated, and you've been saying, where are Democrats? Where are our leaders?
Your party has been humiliated. You have no leadership. It's in complete disarray. And instead of trying to come to grips with reality and coming back to some normal policies, you decided to double down on wokeness. Here's Mark Cuban, best known for getting extremely lucky during the dot-com boom by having one of the companies he invested in get purchased by Yahoo for billions of dollars, which then realized that it wasn't even profitable and then shut it down, saying, some normal things back in 2017 about cutting government waste and government spending.
As a libertarian, I think we can reduce employment in government by at least a third, reduce the overhead and administration by that much or more, so that we can offer more to services for our citizens. And so if when it comes down to it, where I tend to disagree with everybody, and this is the libertarian in me, I'm happy to push down the size of government, and I'm happy to work on making government more efficient, because then more money can pass through and help the people who need it.
That was obviously before he came down with Trump derangement syndrome, because now he is one of Elon and Donald Trump's biggest critics and thinks that Doge is ridiculous. Here's Jon Stewart, who occasionally does call out the left for their nonsense, or just general nonpartisan nonsense that every American can agree on, or at least used to agree on before Trump derangement syndrome, talking about the Pentagon just wasting countless billions of our dollars. This is him sitting down with Joe Biden's defense deputy secretary.
To be doing, like, there is a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse within a system.
Audits and waste, fraud, and abuse are not the same thing. So let's decompose these.
Please educate me on
sure.
What
so an audit is exactly.
This is in light of the Pentagon failing like their 7th audit in a row.
Which you just described,
yes.
Which is, do I know what was delivered to which place?
Right.
The ability to pass an audit, or the fact that the DOD has not passed an audit, is not suggestive of waste, fraud, and abuse. That is completely false right there. So
what is
now is a question of, it's suggestive that we don't have an accurate inventory that we can pull up of what we have where. That is not the same as saying we can't do that because waste, fraud, and abuse has occurred.
So in my world,
yeah,
that's waste.
How is that waste?
If I give you $1 billion and you can't tell me what happened to it, that to me is wasteful. That means you are not responsible. But if you can't tell me where it went, then what am I supposed to think?
And now CBS News has an exclusive interview with one of the USAID employees who has been fired for wasting our tax dollars on, transgender surgeries for people in third world countries, among other things.
Why in our conversation do you think you need to remain anonymous?
It has been a very hard week. Personally, professionally, as I said, I live in Washington, D.C. Many of my colleagues work in this field. Starting from January 21st, so the first day of the new administration,
they're making it seem like this is some groundbreaking whistleblower. That's why they put him in a silhouette, and they're even disguising their voice because they got their feelings hurt because they were laid off. I mean, what's next? Are they going to claim that the Doge layoffs are disproportionately affecting black people and are racist? Oh, wait, what's this?
The federal workforce is the largest employer in the nation, and federal data shows that Black Americans who have historically found greater equity in the public sector compared to the private sector will disproportionately bear the brunt of Trump's effort to gut the federal workforce.
What he means is a bunch of DEI hires are going to be fired. Bye-bye.
This is my brain.
All right, we're back. We're back. Oh, Dennis was still adjusting. I think your microphone fell off, Dennis. You clipped properly. Oh, you got to switch it around. Oh, shit. You know what? You get it. Clip it on the inside. And mine, I didn't turn mine on because I was over there messing with you. We're back. And let's go to the cave, and then we're going to go to the overhead because I want you to see Dennis brought some pie, and I thought we were going to come back from break and eat the pie up here, but these two guys decided to eat the pie down there.
Yeah, we didn't want to be videoed eating the pie.
You don't want to be
wolfing it
videoed
down,
eating the pie?
making all these like snarling noises and stuff like that. So,
Oh, that's good pie.
Dennis, you all clipped up over there?
Yeah. No sugar added cherry pie, I might add.
Very nice. Shout out to Patrick Acton, frequent Tuesday night guy, Tuesday night co-host.
Yeah, we like Pat. He brings that awesome salad when he comes to the show.
He does. Signature salad, signature Patrick salad. You know what I really like, because I'm not a salad guy? I love it when he puts the sweet peppers, strawberries, banana peppers.
Yes.
That with whatever lettuce he puts in there. And there's like 3 or 4 types of lettuce that, like, you can put some. Grandma Connie, the last few years, would put in spinach. She would, like, no matter what, if I was making chicken breasts, if I was making burgers, she would put it on a bed of spinach. And I found that spinach with it's not cabbage, but it's some of the green or some of the purple lettuce. I don't know what it's called.
Cabbage?
I just said not cabbage, Shane. Were you listening? I'm going to play it. Wait, I figured, listen, I've got the clips over here and we were talking about this.
Were you listening to the dude's story, Donnie? Were you listening to the dude's story? So you have no frame of reference here, Donnie. You're like a child who wanders into the middle of a movie.
I got to turn up the audio on that, but that was a good one. You have no frame of reference here, Shane. Were you listening to the dude's story? Anyways, no, there's a purple lettuce. It's not a cabbage. It's a purple lettuce. What, you know what it is, Dennis? You're nodding at me. But anyways, when you get that mix of the purple lettuce and some spinach and some other lettuces in there,
kohlrabi or something,
something like that. Yeah, I love those. And Patrick always makes a signature salad. Not always, but almost always makes a signature salad for the Tuesday night show.
Is it radicchio?
I don't know, but if you've got a picture over there,
yeah,
and you want to share with all the children.
I'm not a big salad guy either, and I kind of have a rule about salad.
Radicchio.
It's like if it looks like something that I scrape out of the bottom of my lawnmower, I'm probably not going to eat it.
And you know what the funny thing is, Larry? I see you every single meal take and get some of Patrick's signature salad.
Not
so that's
every
bullshit.
single meal.
Well, all right. You'll have to remind me the next time you don't participate there, because and I'm playing with all of these. I didn't play with it because it was very important talking with Dan, but
obviously you're not a golfer,
so you don't like the green stuff, apparently. But you know, this is good, and I'm gonna keep playing with my buttons because what I did was I moved it from the main computer over to my computer, and it's less taxing on this to just do the audio bites over here. So we're gonna keep playing with that. Like when I grab the shotgun off the wall here, like this, and I do that.
Bang.
I was a little off on how that button works, but I'm going to get it dialed in because I love that. What did we used to say, Dino, when you were on on that? Got to get that spread. And we would say, oh, that's where the rack. That's where the rack. I don't know. Larry, is your camera even working over there? Let me see.
Larry cam?
It's a Larry cam.
There is
there
a
it
Larry cam.
There's a Larry cam. You know what? The
It's
Larry
not
cam
working.
is on push button 4.
Push button 4.
Oh, that GoPro is dead.
Oh,
It's not dead. It's not on. Push the power button, and you guys will be on. I'll go back to you later.
Okay.
Larry's been redacted.
He's been redacted. I'm gonna eat some more of this pie.
That's a good show too, with the Clayton.
Does it
and
light
Natalie
up
Norris.
when you turn it on?
Redacted? I don't think I've seen
It should. You should see the display in the front. You should see a little button.
Okay.
There's a button on the side of it. Turn up.
There's on the button on the top.
Yeah, you can push as long whatever button you need to push to make that thing come alive is what you need to do.
We got something.
Pie. Anyways, well, welcome back, everybody. I see we're a little light in the chat, but not too bad. Some good stuff was going on. Appreciate all that. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Again, go to defendtheguard.us. And what was the link for the Twitter handle? Remember that one?
Dennis will get it.
Dennis will get it to us.
Yeah.
Get it to us.
And then bringourtroopshome.us.
Yep.
Bring our troops home.
Newshome.us.
Yeah. We've got to bring our troops home. That was a great interview with Dan, even with some of the difficulties, and we had it worked out by the end. I think it's always a new challenge, some equipment and stuff like that, but I got it figured out. What I would do next. I just have to make sure pieces of equipment don't fail.
Yeah,
because we had it working. So where do you guys want to start to continue the rest of the show tonight, and how long do we want to go?
We covered a lot about foreign policy in the first half. I sent you a few links just now, like
which one you want to hit?
Would be good to cover. Just 3 links I sent you.
Okay, I'm going to go 1.
Yeah, go with the first one.
2 and 3.
Or no, it's down. It's down.
Which one you want? You want how party politics destroys the independent thought?
Yes, that looks.
No,
that
Webster.
good.
All right, let's go to this one, and I'm going to click over to that. What browser am I on? Nope, I'm not on that browser. I'm on this browser. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to go to wall feed.
Larry Cam is now functional.
Is Larry Cam functional?
Yeah, they're there.
Oh, let me see. Key it up. Larry Cam. No, I still see that. Number 4, Larry.
He was just
there. It is. There it is. Number 4.
A second ago.
Adjust the thing because it's cutting off your head. That's better.
A little bit better.
Now, Dean, lean in there. Dino's leaning in there.
Larry, you got to get better with those camera angles. Otherwise, you'll be on the first Greyhound back to Oklahoma.
There we go. Well, now that we don't have anybody on Zoom coming in, I can control all the cameras. I wasn't going to touch it before because I didn't want to cut that guy off.
He pushed a button at one point, and I saw it immediately and pushed the button back. I'm like, dude, no. I only programmed
right in on Shane drinking water. See?
Yeah, I only programmed
just saw that
4 buttons for the Zoom. There's a lot of buttons you can program in there.
Then I can zoom in on my friend Jeremy there.
Hello.
Off kilter.
Wait, where am I at?
There you are.
When do you got me on? Was that preset too?
That's news wall. Yeah.
Oh, news wall.
Yeah.
You know what?
JSG.
I adjusted the
There's news wall Y.
You know what's interesting? When you're sitting next to me or Patrick's sitting next to me, I would normally be right there. And when you hit that button, hit it again.
Which one? This one?
The other one. Yeah, now I'm centered.
Yes.
But when I'm hosting, I'm more center. Just when I'm hosting by myself, I'm more center. So we're working out the details. It's fun.
We are.
It's fun. Yeah. Well, I got some of the buttons over here. It's fun. Which one was this?
Christ almighty, it's like I'm sitting here playing cards with my brother's kids or something. You nerve-wracking sons of bitches.
This is a lot of times how it is here, pushing buttons. Look at where's that shot at? What the hell was that shot?
Yeah, that was zooming in on you.
Yeah.
When you moved, I didn't realize.
And I got to get the brother's kids. Oh yeah, see the volume see where that's at, Shane? See where my computer is over there? See how low that volume is? Now I'm going to play it again.
Christ almighty, it's like I'm sitting here playing cards with my brother's kids or something. You nerve-wracking sons of bitches.
See?
Is that Hank Hill?
No, that's
Sounds like
that's Billy Bob Thornton in Tombstone. This is my Tombstone page. This is my whole Tombstone page.
Rest in peace,
Yeah.
Val Kilmer.
Val Kilmer. Yeah, let's play a Val Kilmer.
I got you now, you son of a bitch. You're a daisy if you do.
You're a daisy if you do. And when Dennis gets a little frisky over there and gets a little disrespectful, I'll just say to him,
That is a hell of a thing for you to say to me.
and at the end of the show tonight, we may even say this one.
Good evening, then.
Nice.
Most people aren't seeing that scene in there. That's right after he stabs the guy and takes all the money off the table, and Kate loads it all up, and they go. He looks back at everybody at the table that's stunned that he stabbed the dude who tried to pull a gun at him. He goes, well, good evening, then. And they will.
What a gentleman. That Doc Holliday. What a gentleman.
Yeah, Val Kilmer passed away at 65 earlier this week. Phenomenal actor.
Tombstone probably was his best role.
Yeah. I would say the only two movies that compare to it as far as his acting dynamics, not the depth of the role, but the acting dynamics, is The Doors and The Saint. In The Saint, he played multiple people because that was his role, to be an espionage guy that goes in and impersonates people. Phenomenal job. And in The Doors, most people don't realize in The Doors, he wasn't Oliver Stone's first pick to be Jim Morrison. And he said, okay, if you can convince me through the music, and he literally sent music to the original members of The Doors and to Oliver Stone with him singing, and they couldn't tell the difference. And they said, you got the role. They couldn't tell the difference between Val Kilmer's voice. And the interesting thing, in 2014, that's when he came down with throat cancer and lost that beautiful voice. And you watch him in The Doors, you watch him in The Saint, where he impersonates multiple roles, and he's just got a range of vocal dynamics that is phenomenal. He's just incredible in that. So a great actor. I think one of the non-political, very just did his job and went home. And when you watch, there's a 2021 documentary that he did called Val, and it was a great documentary on that. I think we just watched, Dean and I threw it on the other day, Top Gun Maverick. That was one of his final roles. Here's your mic on? Which one is your mic? Are you number 4? There you go.
There I am.
Yep.
With Top Gun, I thought it was interesting. Remember, we looked up and I thought maybe there was rivalry there between him and Tom Cruise. Well, come to find out that the reality of what is that was the truth. There was a rivalry going on between their acting roles.
Yeah.
There's a bit of pride going on.
Right. But it fed completely into the dynamics
To the
of the
dynamics
movie.
later.
Yeah. The
Oh,
dynamics of that original movie, and then the dynamics of the later movie was so endearing to have him, and to have
Full closure.
Yeah, to have Val Kilmer only being able to type most of his dialogue.
Correct.
Type it into the computer, and him pointing Tom Cruise to the thing. It's so authentic because he was in that recovery mode.
And how realistic was the latent homosexuality of the volleyball scene of Top Gun?
I don't even know what you're talking about.
You know.
This is Navy guys.
You know.
I'm gonna eat some cherry pie.
It was a little gay. Good movie though.
Wow, I wasn't even going there, but fucking. All right, let's get serious.
I think he was
This is
serious.
this is what happens, Dennis, when we have to have a very serious discussion with Dan, and we chopped it up a little bit.
Oh, we sure did.
We did, but then to get back to it, we got to have some levity in here.
Of course.
And do this. Dennis, what are we looking at here? We're gonna go to the wall feed here, and throw you up there. What are we looking at here? This is how the party. I'm gonna do it like a Southern gentleman. This is how the party politics destroys independent thoughts and liberty. Dennis, take it away for us.
Okay. Thanks, Jeremy. So,
What a primer.
Right. And this is an article by Michael Bolden, the leader of the 10th Amendment Center, and it was also the topic of Friday's Path to Liberty episode. And in this, he's quoting and going through the thought process of Noah Webster, who, of course, is a great American educator, Webster's dictionary and all that sort of thing. He was a great linguist, and was one of the people involved in the founding generation of the American Revolutionary cause. And Webster reached a conclusion that was similar to some of the other great leaders of that day, including George Washington, which is that if we allowed factionalism, political party identification to become the number one thing, and made that the main motivation of our participation or activism, then it would be destructive. And because what ends up happening is, instead of thinking for oneself, one is then subject to the herding instinct of what other people are saying. And if there's the great leader, I mean, you can obviously some obvious examples today.
Yeah.
Right. Well, if he says this, you better be for that, and if you're not for that, then you're a traitor. And
yeah, if you're not with us, you're with
like
the
if
terrorists.
Thomas Massey, you're not with the giant overspending bill. Suddenly, you're a traitor for advocating for the principles that we've supported for
well, that's
all our lives.
I mean, that's true, right?
Right.
Isn't that true? No, it's not true. Back to you, Dennis. What do you got?
So like in that case, you could say it's almost like Doge is a Dodge if you don't do the spending cutbacks. If you and this is what Massey was talking about. If you fund all this stuff, then it's all just a charade. You see,
correct,
right?
It was ironic or interesting that Trump attacked him so viciously. Apparently, he didn't even need Massey's vote. But so there was something else going on. There may be another political issue. Where there are some people in the establishment that don't like Massey's approach, and they're trying to cut him down to size. Though on this one, you would think that Republicans, from what we say, we would be with Massey on this. And the same thing back when they had, I think it was the CARES Act during the COVID years.
Yeah.
And Nancy Pelosi wanted to just jam it through and nobody show up and just, no, that's not the way we're supposed to do this. And Donald Trump took Nancy Pelosi's side, and a lot of Republicans said, oh, well, we got to go with Trump because he's the leader of the party, because he's the president or something like that. But this is just recent examples.
Yeah.
This goes on quite a bit. But the point that Webster was making here was that you lose your independence of thought, you lose your independence of spirit, you give up your judgment just to fit in with the crowd and to gain favor with the person in power. And so what ends up happening is, rather than thinking things through and letting your conscience be your guide and standing by principles, you say the thing that we need to do is to just work with this group that we're with, and somebody gets control of that group and then molds everybody together.
Yeah.
And it leads to a very bad dynamic. And so the phrase, the word here that Bolden uses is tribalism.
Okay.
Be a good party man. Go with the flow. You don't need to come in here and ruffle so many feathers. This is the way we've done things. And if you vote, if we all vote together on this horrible bill, we'll show a united front, and we'll get them next time. There's always going to be a million excuses for when the tribalism takes over. When you have a political faction, a million excuses to do the wrong thing.
Right.
And this is what has persisted throughout generations. And they twist people's arms. They use the power of the party and leadership to coerce people, threaten them, throw them off committees. We've seen this in the state of Michigan in recent years. Republicans who wouldn't go along with leadership in the state house, and support some bad unconstitutional policy, they were thrown off the committees. They didn't get any committee assignments. They were deprived of staffers. All their staffers were fired, and they couldn't hire on new staffers and do the job of being a state rep with their outreach to constituents. So they have all these different punitive measures to where if you don't go along with the party, you will be punished. And it's not about principle; it's about going with the flow. And the special interests and the lobbyists really know how to game that system very well.
100%. I'm going to read a couple of these. I'm going to read a couple of these in the tribalism part, and then have Dennis give us his opinion or his pontification on this. Tribalism replaces reason. And the quote from Noah Webster is, who is the article? Michael Bolden. I want to say Michael Bolden, not Bolton, because he's not.
It's Bolden, yeah, and he's quoting Noah Webster.
Yeah,
right?
no, quoting Noah Webster, and I love it. I use the 18. Why is it escaping me? 1828 Noah Webster Dictionary. I have 2 different sites that I go to that have both the dictionaries, and then I have hard copies. A hard copy, it's one of the most phenomenal compilations dictionaries. Anyways, he receives this next line here. He receives a bias from the opinions of the party. And so then Michael writes here, suddenly positions change. What was once wrong becomes right because the party says so. And I disagree with that because that's the part of tribalism that you have to be extremely aware of. There's a dynamic of tribalism that brings you together, that causes you to coalesce, that causes you to be united against a common threat. And then there's a sense of tribalism that negates independent thought and suppresses independent ideas and expressions.
Well, tribalism outside of politics, it might be religion, might be your faith, your family, your community.
Right.
So organically, when it develops in culture, it can be a good thing. But when you add politics to the mix, that's when it's bad.
Is there interest? And let's go down this road for just a minute. I want to go down this road for just a minute with you guys and do look at this. Isn't it interesting? We can all be Lions fans, but think that this coach needs to go, or this player is not as good, or this thing, or be Red Wings fans. The Red Wings are playing right now. There's some people not tuning in because they're watching Red Wings.
Go Pistons fans.
Are they
in the playoffs this year?
Are they in the playoffs?
They're doing good. Yeah.
The Wings are fighting to try to get in. I think they're still 4 or 5 points out right now from the last wild card spot. They faltered after the All-Star break, or we didn't even call it All-Star break now. It was some goofy ass thing. Anyways, the point is, we can all be fans of our respective team, but then have individual opinions. I've sat in the locker room with multiple times with my hockey buddies. Love the Red Wings, right? We can tell you where we were when they won the cup in 96, 97, 97, 98. We can tell you when they won 2001, 2002, 2008, and then they lost in 2009. We can tell you the dynamics of it. Y'all was sitting there doing some bullshit. We can go off on that stuff. Red Wings fans, tribalism. But I think this player needs to go. I think that needs to happen. I think we were calling in the locker room for beginning of the season that the coach needs to go. It's just not working, right? Then they bring the other coach in, and then all of the arguments about this player needs to go, that player needs to go, goes away when they go on a 7-game winning streak right after the coach changing, and then they lose a couple games, but then they go on another 7-game winning streak. And they go, wow, this coach, I guess we don't need to change a lot of players because new coaching staff, new dynamics, new strategies, different line combinations, stuff like that going on. You understand that. Then they go into the All-Star break. They have this week and a half off. They come back, and it's just a skid. Lose, 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 win, lose, 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 win, lose, lose, lose. And now it's back to the arguments. Oh, that player's got to go. This individual, we need more defense. We need a better goalie. We need better. Where you watch this goalie get a shutout against a great team, but the next game he struggles because the defense is not backing him up. Well, it's the defense, it's the goalie. It's all these arguments. And I see this. And the reason I'm bringing this all up is because the tribalism in the political party factions, for me, when I look at it, at the political ideology, instead of staying tribalistic on being conservative and sticking together, we faction at that because we're divided over which player we think needs to be swapped out. Why can't we stick together on we're supporting our team no matter what, and then discuss which players we need to move in and out of the proverbial playing field? You guys follow me?
Yeah, you have it. Okay, so yeah, we might have a different strategy on how to make the team successful than you, but we're still part of.
We're still part of the team.
But the idea, what they want to push is that no matter what the team does, no matter how bad it's failing, no matter how miserable it might be, Mitch McConnell is the manager of the team. He goes 0-162. We have to rally the troops around him anyway. Maybe we
still stick with the team, but we get rid of that fucker.
And maybe we need new ideas.
Correct.
And we need new leaders.
Yeah.
But with Republican Party and politics and factions in general, it's you get the same old crap, and you're supposed to like it no matter how bad it obviously sucks. And we've always done it this way. We're just going along to get along even more. We got to beat the Democrats, and it never gets us anywhere.
It never gets us anywhere. And we forsake the tribalism mentality of okay, if we have a problem with an individual representative, senator, whatever the position is, right? We can't come together enough as a party umbrella to primary those people out. We're so factioned in that process because we reject the overall umbrella of tribalism for the sake of the individualism, and therefore we spin our wheels, we destroy ourselves. And I see that as it's like, so and I'm talking about us here. We're the ones who say, listen, the party says we got to do this. No, the party shouldn't be dictating what we believe. The party should be offering up strategies of how to make it better, and they're not doing that. Am I wrong on that? Yeah, result.
So here's the thing. Here's getting back to the sports team analogy.
Yeah.
When you're in the stadium and there's a penalty or a foul, depending on what the sport is, the view of whether the officiating was done correctly is heavily colored by which team you're rooting for.
100%.
That's just human nature. But, that's okay.
That's the epitome of tribalism.
Right. Okay. Now, what's happening here is because we do have these political tribes, and we have the alleged two-party system.
Right.
Some people say it's really a uniparty, but anyway, a two-party system. What ends up happening is getting people elected that have the party label and the party identification becomes the main objective, rather than living in a free society, having constitutional government, enforcing the Constitution. And so I think that's the aspect that's particularly a problem here, is that everything focuses around, like we say, okay, we're all here for the same thing, to beat the Democrats. I think we have to say, well, why? Why are we doing this? Hopefully, what we're trying to do is, again, do you want to live in a free country?
Right.
Do you want the government to stay within the bounds of the Constitution, as a for instance, and when they violate it, and with the tribalism and with the political parties becoming the main thing and the main motivation for so many people, that gets lost.
It does.
And so I think there's an issue. Some people say, well, would we be better off without political parties? Well, Washington, I think, actually advocated that we not have political parties because he was concerned this sort of thing would develop.
Right.
And you can get a system now where you got allegedly two parties, but it seems like in so many areas, though there's been some divergence from this recently, but in so many areas, it seems to doesn't matter which party wins the elections. Government keeps getting bigger. The spying on us continues.
Yeah.
The restrictions on speech are getting more draconian. The bombings continue. The killings continue. The theft through spending and taxation, and also through monetary inflation and currency depreciation. Those things continue. And so maybe I think some people worry that it might be just a losing game the way it's designed. And then you read some of the things that Madison and others wrote about, what to do. And I think Jefferson wrote about this also. He said, if there's something that's done that's within the Constitution, and the elected official is acting within the Constitution, but maybe not doing as well as they should be in terms of, from an administrative standpoint, that's the sort of thing you say, well, you can wait until an election comes up and then vote in a new person. But what if something is outside the bounds of the Constitution? And this, of course, happens all the time.
Right.
The real issue then becomes, how do we fight that? And Madison and Jefferson in that case, no, I don't think that's when he said nullification is the rightful remedy, but it was something along those lines. He said, direct action. We shouldn't be waiting and just say, well, let's just build up our candidate list and get volunteers and go out and go door to door for candidates. There needs to be political action taken, direct political action taken between elections.
Yeah.
And
isn't that really where the 9th and 10th come in?
Well, yeah, that's a big part of it. And during the fight over ratification, and before they had a Bill of Rights, even, I think it's in Federalist 46 or something, Madison lists the ways of resisting usurpation and tyranny, which the anti-ratifiers, including Patrick Henry and George Mason and some other very prominent American patriots, were worried about. And Madison and Hamilton both said, oh, don't worry, we know that something's outside the bounds of the Constitution, it won't be valid. And Madison said, the frowns of the magistrate or the governor, and a refusal to support the officers of the Union.
Mm-hmm.
Now today, people, my gosh, that sounds like insurrection. Well, this is James Madison saying this is what states should be doing,
right?
And you saying they can do that. You see, so it's okay to go ahead and ratify this document.
Well,
And
the founding fathers were insurrectionists, quite literally.
Yeah,
correct.
Right. Yeah.
Well, the difference between a traitor and a patriot is just a matter of dates, right?
Who won?
Yeah, exactly. Who
History
won?
is written by the victors.
Exactly. And so you could be a traitor one day and then the patriot the next day because you actually won the battle. So anything else on this one, Dennis, that I want to go to before we do this?
I guess just the main thing, and
yeah,
try to keep in
And
mind.
I'll go back to the title up here: how party politics destroys independent thought and liberty.
Right.
And I've dealt with this locally, getting involved in local politics, and then watching the jockeying for power and the bullshit going on instead of. And I grew up in this environment. I grew up in this. Whoops, I didn't. Let me give you the picture up there. I grew up with this in the dynamics of church ministry, to where I understood this, that if you were part of a congregation, then you were quite literally part of a congregation. And if you didn't like what the minister had to say, then you left. You just leave. Just go do your thing, right? But if you're part of the congregation, then you uphold what the leadership is doing in that congregation. You either uphold what the leadership is doing or you leave. Now, if you have influence on the leadership, if you have the ear of the leadership and you can share your observation, great. If you're part of the team, if you're part of this. But my understanding is either you're part of the group there and you uphold the vision of the leader and wait for the better perspective, or you move on to do something else. Okay. So what I'm saying is the tribe, I'm going back to the tribalism a little bit of this dynamic of either you're with, I'm not saying this, the Bush doctrine. Jesus said, if they're not against me, then they're for me. Right. So you don't go after people that don't 100% uphold you. But then if you're part of the inner circles, you're part of the leadership, and you're not running the thing. I don't go to Shane and go, Shane, I think you should run the Grand New Party like this. It's not my organization. It's not my thing. He doesn't walk in here and go, I think you should run the podcast like this. I think you should do this. I think you should do that. Do you think maybe you should turn that computer on and do this?
So that's the problem.
Jeremy, I think you should fix the Zoom.
I did on the fly. The last hour and 15 minutes was awesome. But my point is that we have this tribalism mentality is so distorted. When the leader's in power, if you have influence to speak to the leader and say, hey, I disagree with this, I disagree with that, I'm going to talk to you about it. But if I'm not in that position, then I'm going to be with you as best to my ability, 100%, or I'm going to be out. But to create factions within the whole thing and not be, you follow what I'm saying, guys? It's like if you're part of a congregation, then be 100%, then find out what the vision is. Instead of, and I watch so many people in all different areas of life. Okay. They just want to attack the leader. They never take the moment to find out what the leader's dealing with. And then if they do have influence on the leader, they don't want to say, I disagree with you. So you've got yes men that are close to the leadership, and you've got divisionists, people that just want to have their own opinion and do this. And we never get to this independent thought and liberty because we're being negative with no influence, and we're being yes men when we have the inner circle opportunities. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Inner circle opportunities, and you just go along with it when you should be pushing back and saying, I disagree with this. Maybe you ought to check that. That's your opportunity. Or being just negative for the sake of being negative, and you don't have any influence. You're online, you're a keyboard warrior, you're posting, oh, I disagree with them. I disagree with them. Well, you know what Scripture says? If you got a problem with your brother, you go to him one-on-one. Well, he won't listen to me, and I don't have him one-on-one. Well, why aren't you calling your representative and flooding the switchboard with a whole bunch of information and letting them know? And then if you do have influence, if you do have an opportunity, we just listened to Dan talk about it where he stood up in a crowd and he stops him and says, I remember you. Well, what happened the next week? Or not the next week, but after he voted 3 times to extend the Afghan war. He was in his office with a whole bunch of cameras saying, what the hell are you doing? That's how you operated. That's true. You didn't have the ear, or you did have in that case, he did have the ear because he knew him, but he didn't know him. And then he stood up and he said, I recognize you. Okay, well, then I'm going to take a group of people and we're going to go in with cameras and we're going to hold you accountable. And so there's this dynamic of we're destroying independent thoughts and liberty because either we're a keyboard warrior that's just wanting to attack from the outside and we're not trying to get the inroads and go to our brother one-on-one or one-on-two or then bring it before the congregation, proverbially, or we have the inside and we're a yes man. Guys?
And I think, let me add something real quick. I think in terms of the Republican Party, I think that the success that we've had in the grassroots has come from people getting involved in the process and making those one-on-one connections with people, maybe not the Washington, D.C. leaders who are so removed from society and are gilded and they don't want to, they have no thoughts of the concerns of the regular people because they're in such a bubble. Maybe not them, but district leaders, county leaders, statewide, state committee members. Those are the people that we've had success in opening their eyes. And, that's why the Defend the Guard resolution was passed unanimously by the Michigan Republican State Party, because we were working through the grassroots, getting, building bridges and opening people's eyes to what was going on. So that's what you have to do to fight through the factionalism, is you have to take issues that matter to people and you have to get involved in the process in some way. And then you have to reach out to people and open their eyes on that particular issue. It's not easy. There's a lot of roadblocks that'll be standing in the way of you, but that is the only way to do it. And we've had a lot of success in that regard in recent years. I think it was a lot of that Tea Party, liberty, rabble rousing back in the early 2010s that really built the platform for Trump to take off.
Oh, yeah.
So I think there's been a lot of good things that have come out of that. And we just have to keep doing that to fight back against the factionalism and get people's minds off of, what faction A is doing, what faction B is doing, and actually look at the issues that will help save the country.
I as he's saying that, Dennis, and I know I want you to speak to this. I want, whatever your point is right now, keep that in mind. But I also want to speak to the concept in Scripture that Paul wrote about. He said, the greatest among you must, or I think it was maybe Jesus said it. Either way, it's in the Scriptures. That the greatest among you must be the servant of all. That's a quote from Christ. The greatest among you must be the servant of all. And our whole form of government was built on a constitutional representative republic. And this dynamic of when we lose that element of, and we lose it locally. I've seen it. I've seen it lost locally, to where when people get a position of quote unquote power, they start to disconnect from the people that they're supposed to represent. Our form of government was set up to be a government where the citizen. I think back, and Dennis, you can speak to this as well. The historical concept of Greek and Greco-Roman dynamics of they had stones, and they would do the stones, and you could get literally picked by picking the right stone to serve in a government capacity in your region, in your tribe, and wherever you're at in this republic dynamic, because you picked the right stone, not because you're the most qualified, but because you had a vested interest in your community, and you walked up and you picked a stone out of a bag, and it happened to be the stone that said, you're going to represent us for the next couple of years, and it caused everybody in the community to have a vested interest. We have so devolved from that to where we have these career politicians, as Dan talked about, the governor of Idaho, yes. And then became a senator, and he hadn't held a real job, which was a DA job, since the 70s. This is ridiculous. We need to get back to citizen servants who go and serve for a couple of years, don't get a pension, don't get a fucking golden parachute, but then go back to their community, go back to their jobs, go back to the things. And that way we're constantly revolving, where everybody's aware of government, aware of the machinations that are going on there. We're dealing with these things. We're learning. We're coming back. We're talking to our constituents to go, look, I'm just serving for a couple of years. I'm going to go back and do my thing. That's dive in on any one of those angles. I know you already had an angle on what Shane and I had talked about, but dive in on any of those, Dennis, and just pontificate for us.
Happy to pontificate.
I love it. I love it. I try not to talk too much when Dennis is here because he's so fucking awesome.
Go ahead. Principled pontifications with Dennis Marburger. Go right ahead.
Have microphone, we'll pontificate. So a couple things. One will be somebody I know says we have unalienable rights, right?
I love saying it that way.
Yes, but it's a great point. And I'm thinking tying into that something that, among others, Chris Ann Hall says, right? She quotes, I think it's Adams, we have a property in our liberty. And our liberty that we have property in is granted by God, right? As Judge Napolitano points out,
Yes.
The Bible says we are made in his image.
Yes.
He is made free, therefore we are made free, right?
Okay.
And I say, building it, that, and as Chris Ann Hall says, we have a duty to preserve that liberty and protect it, to pass it down to future generations.
Yes.
All right. And I say, borrowing another comment that you hear in the church, what God has joined together,
let no man